Chapter 1638. A ray of light in the dark. When this phrase was mentioned, yin-washing would often subconsciously list a lot of concrete or abstract things behind it. Something like the light that guides the lost, the only hope in the dark, and the ability to forcefully extend one's life. Well, it was not a problem to mention such a phrase when the above scenes appeared. But when he really experienced it, he could not help but sigh. At least there is still light. He had once seen a world. He had forgotten the level and type of civilization and era of life in that world. Probably because there were not many memorable things that happened in that world. Only fragments of memories flashed through his mind. At that time, the sky was still very blue. The clouds and the sun were reflected in the clear water. The children in the village were noisy, chasing each other as they copied the childhood memories of countless people. A child squatted next to them, watching them, and was responsible for copying another part of their childhood memories. In that village surrounded by forests and water, it seemed that every day, other than eating, drinking, and sleeping at most, there was nothing more to do. So, why did he go there that time? Well, this question was very fresh. He also wanted to know the answer, but he could not figure it out. In fact, when he looked at the things in front of him, he remembered the lazy time in the village, watching a group of little kids slowly grow up. He could not help but sigh with emotion about time and youth. Well, his thoughts went astray. After all, at that time, his brain was not normal. A ray of light, a lantern. That's right. What he wanted to say was that he vaguely remembered that on every paved and inlaid bluestone street in the village, there would always be a lantern hanging 3 meters above the ground between two buildings. It was a lantern that provided light when the night fell. Surrounded by woods and lakes, it seemed to be a small village on the edge of a wetland. It was surrounded by giant trees that were thousands of feet high. The canopy of the trees covered the sky and the sun. The light of the sun and moon could rarely directly pass through the gaps in the sky and fall on the village. Only when the sun and moon were about to set could the light from a slanted direction. It was very dark at night. The lights of the lanterns were not bright enough. When the wind blew, they would make a clicking sound and sway in the wind, and the light and shadow they cast would also sway. Looking from afar, at first glance, the lanterns on the entire street were swaying very rhythmically from left to right. It looked like a haunted place. It was very creepy, especially those swaying shadows, which were like shadows lurking in the darkness. Lantern. He wanted to say that it was a lantern. Until now, he had not forgotten the appearance of that lantern. It was round and had a wide base. The higher it went, the smaller it became. The lid at the top was 1 or 2 times smaller, but both the lid and the base were designed very beautifully. The complicated shape and the exquisite patterns engraved in this place did not look like something that a small village would have. It looked more like something that was placed in a solemn and ceremonial place to light up the place. Well, this was not a prejudice. That was his first impression. He could not help but remember it himself. In short, it was such a lantern. He remembered the gorgeous decorations and the significance of it, but he was not clear about the specific situation. He was impressed by the huge and exquisite of the lid and the base, just like the thing in front of him. In the dark energy storm, a golden light with the brilliance of the stars was the only light in this dark storm. It was a lantern, black with a bit of cyan in it. The lid and the base were flashing with cyan light. Both of these things were particularly huge and complicated. They seemed to contain a lot of meanings, but they were all very ancient meanings that he could not understand at all. The thin glass cover in the middle was completely transparent. Inside, there was only a golden flame shining with the brilliance of the stars in the sky. It was a relic of the origin. As soon as he saw it, someone who had recovered to his full state began to become embarrassed again. Just now he was in a daze. Although the lantern in the small village in his memory was completely different from the one in front of him, he himself had no idea why his thoughts could run so far away. As for why he digressed from the topic, when he encountered the matter of the origin, his mind was like a runaway monarch Qing Jun running all over the void. How could he pull it back so casually? Well, in fact, his mind had run elsewhere in order to escape. It was purely an accident that he touched the memory. He had never thought that there was still a slight fear of the origin in his heart. There was probably no way to suppress this fear for hundreds of billions of years. The dark storm was still blowing in his ears. The lantern in his hand was still stubbornly resisting the contact of him, the impure person of origin. While resisting loudly, it came into contact with the same origin energy as it, and then gradually relaxed, allowing him to take it into the mark of origin. Cough, cough. I ran too fast. I haven't gone in yet. The process is not so fast. It will take a while. So, this gust of wind has no intention of stopping for the time being. Speaking of this lantern, the flame was really bright. It seemed that the void, the galaxy, and billions of stars were all gathered in the flame and projected on the transparent glass cover. If he took this thing out and let others see it, they would probably enter a state of enlightenment immediately. Countless shining lights in his mind turned into a brilliant river of energy that surged around him. Ah, that would be Tao assimilation. The rules and concepts contained were too complex and too powerful. He would not be able to withstand that level of impact with a single glance and would directly disappear. He had the protection of origin energy and several origin rules that were not under his control. So, he would not disappear. However, his mind was so scared that it had flown away to escape. It had been running off topic for half a day because it was trying to find its way back. Now that it had finally returned, it was unwilling to return to its original position. Scratching his own hair, Yin Nuashing stared straight at the lantern and tried his best to mobilize the newly activated origin energy to touch the lantern. Perhaps it was because of this absent-minded state that he could vaguely sense a little bit of thoughts, little emotions from the origin relics or the origin energy. The more he came into contact with the origin relics, the more he could sense those little emotions. It was as if when the origin energy activated them, they in turn made the energy in his body a little more lively. Wait a minute. The end of this lively. Wouldn't that be over 140 origin energy essences? God, do you have to torture me like this? Yin Nuashing slapped himself in the face and pressed his mind that was about to drift away back to its original position. He could not feel those little emotions. When the origin energy essences tortured him, and when the origin energy reshaped the continent of origin, they were the most abundant. The entire continent of origin was filled with some kind of lingering sound that sounded like weeping and complaining. And when he came into contact with the origin relics, he had already suffered a lot when he came into contact with the sins of the world. They were the condensation of the dark side of all things in the world. But those were not as destructive as the little emotions gathered in the origin energy. Phew! The sound of the wind in his ears gradually subsided. Yin Nuashing looked around. The storm that was as dense as a wall had a gap and was about to stop. If there was rain, it should have turned from heavy rain to light rain. It was the time when the wind and rain stopped. The quaint black lantern with a tinge of blue dimmed its light, and the light of the stars inside gradually became brighter. His mind would not run away in a panic when he looked at it again. You're also reminiscing? Like your 100 brothers. Are you all waiting for someone to come and find you? Yin Nuashing whispered softly as he held the lantern that was larger than usual. The light of the stars and the lantern flickered as if responding to his question. At the same time, the other 12 origin relics that were already living in the mark of origin responded one after another, each of them recounting the pain of countless years in their own way. Well, he suddenly felt that he had gotten used to it. It was probably because he was using the divine body of spiritual absorption in the 139th era. At that time, his body was also full of little beings, and the ones here were even more excessive. They were all of the origin class. Well, from now on, he only needed to go out alone to create a lively atmosphere. What kind of divine skill was that? A few minutes later, the storm completely stopped. The energy that permeated the world quietly returned to the lantern and drilled into his mark of origin. This time, there was no crystallization on his body, but the color of the 4 energy streamers became more brilliant as if something was brewing. Foam! How are you? How are you? Are you hurt? Are you tired? Are you going to die? Yin Nuashing said, I would have been touched if you had just said those words. Hey, have you ever come back unscathed from an origin relic that was forcibly activated? Hui smacked his lips nonchalantly and went forward to pinch his arm, pulling his origin crystal and looking left and right. He was a little surprised. Amazing. There seems to be no accident this time. Even your aura did not fluctuate. Why do I feel like you are hoping that something will happen to me? Hey, I didn't look carefully when you turned small last time. Ahem. Sorry, I was wrong. Don't hit me at this critical moment. Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes and put away the nether void sword in his hand. He put the lantern in front of Hui, Jing Yuanji, and the middle-aged man who had caught up from behind and explained, this time it was surprisingly smooth. Although I don't know if there's any hidden danger, at least for now. Well, I will keep an eye on it for a while. Hui held the lantern in his hand and looked at it over and over again. After a while, he handed it back to Jing Yuanji. How is the situation now? With the addition of the origin relic, has there been any change in the resonance with the origin relic? Yes. Yin Nuashing's expression became serious when he mentioned that. The resonance of the relic of origin has become clearer. Over at the barren plains, there is a huge energy storm forming. Its movement and scale are completely like a smaller version of the storm of divine destruction. Its nature is completely opposite. If that thing continues to gather, it won't be fun anymore, a chaotic version of the destructive storm of gods. Huey's cheeks twitched violently. He crossed his arms and fell in a deep thought. That's not fun. If things have gotten to this point, I'm afraid the life in the origin relic. Yin Nuashing and the other two looked at each other and fell silent. The middle-aged man could feel the seriousness of the situation just by listening to a few words. He could not help but sigh softly. His heart was a little heavy. There are trillions in the origin relic. If other life forms are included, I'm afraid it's in the trillions. Those can basically be put on the death list. Hui scratched his head. Previously, in order to cleanse the origin relic and force the sovereign's palace out, we had set up a one-time energy barrier in every city. It was supposed to be used to resist our attacks. If it's just a normal attack, it can still hold on for a long time. He turned his gaze to Yin Nuashing. The latter shook her head. The chaotic storm has gathered an endless amount of non-order energy. The law of chaos. Even the void will be restored to its original state in front of that level of power. Those mere life forms that live in the void are not even considered collateral, let alone a one-time energy barrier. Even if our creation's barrier comes, it will only be a matter of time before it breaks through. I'm just afraid that the chaotic storm will do some superfluous things. Superfluous things? Hui was stunned for a moment. Looking at Yun Nuashing's solemn expression, he was shocked. Are you saying that the chaotic storm will turn all life forms into those derivatives? If it doesn't just do destructive things, and the possibility of that is very high. Yin Nuashing nodded. They hadn't specifically discussed the chaos spawn in the beginning. Even though it was theoretically stronger than the abyssal death mist spawn, the chaos spawn's greatest weakness was their numbers. Now, if the trillions of lives in the Ridge Primordial were all transformed by the chaos spawn, then they would have to think carefully about how to break into the Ridge Primordial or how to deal with the chaos spawn that rushed out from the Ridge Primordial. There was another long silence. The few of them looked at each other and thought in their hearts. Then they sighed in their hearts, their faces full of bitterness. Yin Nuashing and the others felt sad that they did not bring enough people with them when they went out. The middle-aged man felt bitter because he had allowed such a thing to grow, and one day it would become such a disaster. Forget it. Let's not talk about this first. Anyway, let's go and collect the other origin relics first. Yin Nuashing waved his hand to disperse the gloomy aura that pervaded the place. As the number of origin relics increases, I seem to be able to vaguely sense the vague aura scattered all over the cloud continent. It's very vague, but a few more should make this feeling clearer. Hui asked, the aura of the other origin relics. Yin Nuashing nodded. Let's go back to the ice region first. There were many things that needed to be discussed. The matters regarding the cloud continent still needed Jihan Shao and the other local rulers to handle. The cloud continent was still in a state of chaos and slight panic. The changes in the situation, as well as the handling of various places, were things that this group of natives had to do. This group of outsiders was responsible for handling the matters regarding the void in order that the natives could not handle. As for the other matters, they would just treat it as training for Jihan Xiao and the others before they stepped into the void domain. After building the teleportation portal to the ice region in the Flying Feather Embrace, Xing Lu and the others sent some news as soon as they returned. The energy defense line built around the Gangyuan continent was ready. It was a miniature version of the Void Seal. Although it looked like they had surrounded the Gangyuan continent, it was hard to say who was the one who had surrounded whom. In fact, it was another matter whether this level of seal was useful or not. It was set up by Hui. Yin Nuoxing thought that he should have his own considerations, so he did not bother about it. He just treated it as a layer of primary barrier. In an area surrounded by hundreds of thousands of energy towers, the firepower could cover any place in an instant. If all the energy towers were overloaded and focused fire, Yin Nuoxing believed that the specter, whose existence was unknown, would lose a layer of skin. It's a pity that we don't have enough energy crystals. Xing Lu shrugged as he reported. Moreover, the reserves of the energy towers have been used up. I'm still rushing to make more with 4 others, but I don't think we'll be able to make too many energy towers before the time limit is up. Perhaps there would only be enough for each person to use as backup weapons. Taking out hundreds of thousands of energy towers in one go had really used up the reserves. Well, it was the reserves of more than 50 people. From that one sentence, one could see how sick they were. If all the warriors of the divine realm were present, they could use the energy towers to surround the Gangyuan continent so tightly that not even a drop of water could escape. With hundreds of millions of energy tower cannons rumbling, and with Hui maintaining the origin energy and origin precepts to create the domain of creation, they would have a 40% chance of winning even against the specter's true form in the graveyard of gods and demons. That's right, after half a day of effort, their chances of winning had increased by 10%. Don't underestimate this 10%, okay? The specter was of the same generation as the god of origins, a mythical being of the same level as them. That 40% chance of winning was just a rough calculation, and he himself was not sure how much of an error there was in reality. If there really was another specter in the Gangyuan continent, he could only pray that it would be slightly weakened by time. Just use whatever means you have to deal with the energy crystals. I reckon that the primary barrier won't be of much use. Even though that's the truth, it's still too annoying for you to say that. Xing LV smiled bitterly, scratching his head and asking Yin Nuoxing, is it already that bad? Maybe it'll get worse. Yin Nuoxing yawned, and through the new information he had just received to everyone. Everyone who received the information fell silent at once. This was really an earth-shattering change. Sigh, it's useless to think about that. I'm going to make energy crystals and energy towers. Xing LV curled his lips and waved his hand. Then he grinned and said, who cares? Let's go all out. I don't believe that we won't be able to break through a layer of its armor. Yin Nuoxing, maybe after he went back, he could hand over this 100-million-year newcomer to Qingjun. In a few years, there would be another powerful fighter in the large army that was rushing through the void. After this sentence, Yin Nuoxing clearly felt a fierce restlessness in the soul transmission. It was as if the atmosphere had been ignited, and it was inexplicably a little hot-blooded. He glanced at it and felt that there was no harm, so he didn't care anymore. Let them slowly get hot-blooded. Just treat it as a warm-up exercise before the battle. After hurriedly reporting the situation to Jihan Xiao and the others, Yin Nuoxing pushed the middle-aged man in front of everyone and let him explain what he had just said. Then, he went to another place with another person to subdue another suppressed relic of origin. The task of collecting all the relic of origin was still a little long. In the beginning, he didn't even dare to think about it. He didn't expect that he would be dragged to Black Nest like a strong man by Hui, and in the end, cause such an earth-shattering move. By the way, I don't know about her relic. As soon as this thought appeared in his mind, Yin Nuoxing trembled fiercely and shook his head hard to stop himself from thinking about it. She was probably still living in a daze in some corner of the Yuan realm, as a reincarnated body. At present, he shouldn't treat her as a dead person, although she did die once. Compared to this, he was more afraid of himself, who could subconsciously and naturally drag his thoughts to her. It seemed that he had begun to get used to these things. He was used to the existence of her things, used to looking for those things by himself, and used to the stupid matter of the origin. If he continued to think about it, he felt that he would really become very strange, so it was better to stop thinking about it quickly. We stayed in the ice region to discuss other things with Ji Hanxiao and the others. Only Jing Yuanji still followed Yin Nuoxing to other people's houses. Actually, it was only when he saw that Jing Yuanji was still following a certain fellow who risked his life every day that Hui felt slightly at ease and stayed in the ice region. If he really went out alone, who knew when he would come back as a 3-inch body again? That would really make him laugh until he collapsed. So, regarding the concept layer of rules, I will take the lead. Those of you who carry the rules of this world will have a great advantage if you come together. I will confront the forces of chaos, and you will deal with the forces of sovereign palace that may exist. As long as one side wins, the concept layer of rules will be controlled by us, and our chances of winning will increase. Ah, you're back. Hui, who was discussing those matters with the others in the ice region, suddenly turned his head and saw the open door. 3 people walked in slowly. Yin Nuoxing yawned as she walked. Even her body had dimmed a little this time, but it didn't seem to be a big problem. She then abandoned the battle meeting that was in progress and went over. How is it? What is it this time? Yin Nuoxing yawned and pushed away someone who came too close. She slowly took out a necklace from her lapel and waved it in front of his eyes. It was a silver necklace with an amethyst-like gem hanging on it. It was very gorgeous, and the surging origin energy was also quite gorgeous. It's a different accessory this time. We took a closer look and couldn't help but say, this style, this structure, it's basically for women to wear. Ugh. As he said, he looked up at Yin Nuoxing's face and then calmly lowered his head. With his face, what's wrong with wearing a woman's accessory? Yin Nuoxing looked at him with gritted teeth. If it wasn't for the fact that I need to conserve my strength now, I would have pressed you into the void. Hey, you don't have a strength anyway. You there, take him away. Hurry up and don't let him be lazy. Hui smiled and waved his hand, pointing at a person, and then turned around to send Yin Nuoxing out of the door. If you have the strength to talk, why don't you take the opportunity to rest more? You look dimmer again. Jing Yuanji, remember to keep an eye on him. Don't let him do anything. Yin Nuoxing, Kanzaki swear. Chapter 1639. On a certain morning. Oh, there was no morning. The entire world was covered in smoky, dark clouds. Even if the sun and the moon appeared at the same time, there was no wonder in the sky. It was now a certain morning when the sun rose. Suddenly, there was a violent explosion of energy that spread across the entire cloud continent, causing everyone to turn their attention to it. Following the first sound, there was a dense explosion of energy. It was as if an entire meteor had landed head to tail on the ground. The tremors were spreading across the entire space. The sudden tremors drew everyone's attention to the ridge origin. They saw the defensive circle formed by the energy towers launching a series of energy attacks at the ridge origin. Hundreds of thousands of energy crystals shone at the same time, lighting up the sky. Every energy torrent was powerful enough to end the history of any land in the cloud continent. The energy torrents rained down on the ridge origin's energy barrier, but they didn't even cause a ripple on the barrier. The only thing that could be seen was endless energy fireworks exploding madly, tearing apart the surrounding land layer after layer. Amidst the dazzling energy explosions, it seemed as if something was spiraling and being torn apart by the energy torrents. Lord Feng, Lord Hui, detected the appearance of chaos spawns. Strength low. Due to the urgency of the situation, we have made the first move. Not long after the energy tower rumbled, a report came from the Soul transmission. Huey's expression froze. The weak chaos spawns said, "That's them testing us. They're testing our strength." In other words, This is a declaration of war. His gaze turned to the outside of the wellspring's barrier. The number of chaos spawns that came out was not particularly high. It was like throwing out some converted cannon fodder to test the waters. The defensive line formed by hundreds of thousands of energy towers reduced them to ashes before they could run more than 100 meters. It was a pity that they could not break the energy barrier. He wanted to see what was going on inside. They're also beginning to test our strength. We have to hurry. By the way, I have 2 news. Hui raised 2 fingers and shook them. They're either testing our strength or deliberately throwing out some cannon fodder to try and weaken our strength. After all, if they use too much energy in a short period of time, the energy crystals will collapse. Of course, the spare ones are stored in the energy towers. Whether they know about this is still a question mark. As for the other, Hui was silent for a moment. He looked up and sighed. Let's just say that we are praying. Maybe they're not as strong as we think. Otherwise, they would not need to use such a pointless method. Listen, the sound of the energy towers is about to stop. Everyone looked in the direction of the wellspring land. Compared to the dense energy bombardment from before, the energy towers now only released a torrent of energy that swept across the land every 2 to 3 seconds. This also indicated that the enemy's probing cannon fodder was about to run out, or at least this batch of cannon fodder. Using an energy barrier to isolate the wellspring, and that guy is obviously brewing something inside. There is reason to believe that they have not achieved their goal. Like us, they are also buying time. Hui sighed. That being said, we also need time. It's not rational to rush in and fight just because the other side seems to be holding back. Phone, how's the situation on your side? I want to die. Usually, people who say that won't die for a while. So, how are the origin relics? 77. Let me rest. Don't disturb me. Yin Nuoxing's image appeared in front of Huey's eyes with a face full of pain. Compared to a few days ago, he looked a little smaller now. He looked haggard, his hair was disheveled, and he was in an extremely sorry state. He couldn't help but complain, "You look like a ghost." Yin Nuoxing's hand pulled half of his face down. His blood-red eyes stared straight at the blabbermouth guardian. If it wasn't for my lack of energy, all right. I know you want to push me into the void, but now is obviously not the time. Hui waved his hand and ignored the death stare. You must have heard the commotion in the wellspring. Phone, are you all right? Although he saw someone's ghost-like face, he subconsciously thought that he just suffered a little too much and wanted to escape. However, after observing for a while, he found that it didn't seem to be the case. Hui suddenly froze and asked in a low voice. The dark room was so dim that he could barely see anything. His eyes that were used to the darkness and the faint light that shone from behind allowed him to catch the edge of the shadows. It was a mess. The entire room was in a mess. The entire room had signs of being ravaged by violent energy. The bed, the table, the chairs, and some of the things that were arranged in the room had all fallen to the ground and were piled on top of each other in a disorderly manner. Yin Nuoxing maintained the appearance of his soul projection and said in a faint but weak voice, I won't die, but if I have to die, phew, if you're willing to send me on my way, it's not impossible. After saying that, while Hui was still in a daze, he stretched out his hand to grab the edge of the bed and used all his strength to pull himself back onto the bed. Yin Nuoxing gasped for breath. Her pretty face was even paler. She no longer had the strength to pick up the quilt that had fallen on the ground. She curled into a ball on the bed. Her eyelids were so heavy that she wanted to close them several times as if she was going to fall asleep. The matter of the wellspring. You can deal with it. The origin relic. Give me some more time. Hui looked at his weak soul projection and was suspicious. Buddy, are you really going to die? There's still time. If you really can't do it, then don't push yourself so hard. The projected Yin Nuoxing gave a long yawn and rolled his eyes. I know. If there's nothing else, you can go and rest. I'm, studying the origin relic. After saying that, he turned and disappeared. Hui always felt that something was not right, but he could not put his finger on it. According to his intuition, that guy must be hiding something, a small problem. It was the kind of small problem that could be barely hidden. As long as he went over now, he would definitely be able to see through it. Well, as a close friend for a few eras, let him be stubborn at this time. Feng knows what he's doing. If something really happens, he'll obediently call for help. Hui thought of this and sighed in relief. Although he could not give Feng much advice regarding the origin relic, if he could let Feng be stubborn at this time. Nonsense. The origin relic was the most important thing now. 5 days had passed, and a total of 77 unknown origin relic had been collected. According to Feng's bottom line, he had 147, which corresponded to the 47 known heavenly gods of origin. If he could not even collect this number of origin relic, he would have a 30% chance of winning. If he could not even collect this number, there was no need to fight this battle. Hui muttered to himself for a moment and looked at Jihan Xiao and the rest. Other than leaving some energy to continue monitoring the land of Gangyuan and speed up the search for the origin relic, do your best to find it. 147 might just be a base number. In reality, we're not very sure how many there are. Have the legends, myths, and rumors left behind in your world mentioned this part? How many ancient origin spirit relics are there? Even if it's just a guess. Jihan Xiao frowned and pondered for a moment. He shook his head gently. Ancient relic. From what I know, among the ancient legends in the past 10 billion years, there are not many that mention ancient relic. After he finished speaking, he turned to look at the others, and they all nodded. Hui sighed. Although he did not have much hope, he was discouraged too quickly. However, it was as if they did not completely understand the realm of the gods. At most, their understanding of their own world was 40 to 50% more than Jihan Xiao and the others, so it was not appropriate for them to criticize others. The massive Soul Conference. At this moment, a group of leaders and authoritative figures scattered across the Cloud Continent and several lower continents were gathered here to conduct daily exchanges and reports. Their consciousnesses in the modern realm were constantly busy. What happened in the Wellspring continent only caused them to pause and observe for a moment before they continued to work. Phew, I've finished reporting today's matter. Although there's nothing wrong for now, it's this kind of situation that makes me even more worried. Jihan Xiao looked around and finally glanced at Yin Nuoxing, who had only shown her face for less than half a minute. He then looked at Hui. I'll try to find some ancient information about the ancient origin spirit. I'll tell you guys if there's anything else. Wait. Min suddenly called out to Jihan Xiao, who was about to leave. He said to everyone, this batch of recruits have reached the point where they can be of use. Let's exchange for the next batch. Everyone became more spirited. At such a terrible time, other than the good news of origin relics being discovered, this was the only news that could make them more spirited. Using the power of the void to catalyze a portion of high-level origin realm people so that they could be of greater use during the battle in the concept layer of laws. This plan was proposed by Min. Most of her power came from the void. The strength of her energy, the nature of laws, the power of laws, and the nature of order. These levels were much stronger than the people of the Cloud Continent and were weaker than Hui and the others from the God World. However, the latter's special model could not be cultivated quickly. If they were divided into a few stages, they could not even reach the first stage. Min's power just happened to be within the limits of what the life forms of the Cloud Continent could endure. It was the kind of pressure that would cause trouble if she was just a little bit stronger. Most importantly, she could speed up to 2 or 3 stages. Directly using the power of the void to irrigate and forcefully change a part of the body, soul, and structure, it would allow everyone to specialize in the power of order, law, and void. It would make it much easier for them to deal with order and chaos on the battlefield. Min's void God Court's power was cultivated slowly using this method. However, it was naturally not catalyzed quickly, which family's core power was not cultivated slowly. However, they did not have that much time now, so they could only choose to speed it up. The speed of it made her feel that something was wrong, but there was no better choice at the moment. Every bit of power was better. Anyway, she was not the one who felt strange. As for the things that happened after that, she had already said it. Since everyone agreed, they should be mentally prepared. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. When they were about to leave, Min suddenly thought of something. Remember to replenish the things that you have used up. The group who had just retreated and turned around to leave staggered. They could not help but smile bitterly in their hearts. The things that they had used up referred to the materials that they needed to replenish the last time, the spiritual materials that were born with the laws of the cloud continent. At the moment, they did not have more strength to directly change the power of the rules. It would be best to use the power of the rules that was more suitable for themselves. In other words, they had to desperately use the reserves that they had accumulated for countless years to create a batch of effective forces to deal with the upcoming battle. They were already mentally prepared when the plan was proposed. However, when they heard men saying that they had used up all the materials, they still felt their hearts bleeding. The last time they sent so much of it, it only took a few days for them to burn it all. Watching the group leave, they did not know whether to laugh or cry. In the blink of an eye, there were only 4 people left. Hui shrugged at Min and said, "It's just a money-burning thing." Although everyone is very motivated, the current conditions are still not comprehensive. There are many aspects that we can't take care of. There's not enough time to change the rules and the mark of order. We can only use the ready-made things. Min said faintly. She raised her eyebrows slightly and looked at the empty space in Yun Nuashing. "How is he? You've really stumped me." Hui scratched his head in distress and turned to look at Jing Yuanji. "You want to see Maple the day before yesterday, right? How is he?" Jing Yuanji's pretty face had been filled with worry and worry. She had not spoken during the soul conference. At this moment, when she heard Huey's words, she quickly perked up. "Yes. In fact, Lord Maple has been closing the door. I'm not too sure what's going on inside. Lord Maple has also temporarily entrusted Ming and the others to me. Now, that means no one can know about Maple's situation for the time being." Hui rubbed his forehead in distress and looked at the little angel standing beside Jing Yuanji, who was also absent-minded. The two of you should be telepathic. You can sense through the air. Well, I know I'm messing around, but now I'm a little worried about that idiot. I'm afraid that he'll cause trouble." The little angel looked at Hui with a strange gaze. After a moment, her eyelids drooped slightly as if she was really sensing. He's struggling on the more dangerous boundary. His spiritual world and spiritual senses have been completely sealed. I can only make a rough judgment. The limit of danger. Hui lowered his head and frowned. As expected, there are too many primordial relics. Is the body and soul unable to bear the burden? Or is it that there are too many primordial precepts and primordial energy activated, causing other problems? The little angel shook her head. When he was dealing with that batch of origin relics, they were asked to leave the spiritual world by him. Only the Ice Princess was still sleeping inside. The latter could not be moved. As for them, he was afraid that if they came into contact with too many origin relics, there would be an accident. He could not protect them, so he could only let them go out first. In the end, there was no way to know about Maple's situation. Hui let out a long sigh and waved his hand. "Let's wait and see. Don't worry about him for the time being. Right now, he should need to find a place to hide and do something by himself. Just treat it as a long-lost seclusion. The collected origin relics will be placed in the same place as usual and let him deal with them himself. We'll go our separate ways and arrange the future before he's done with his preparations." Jing Yuanji and Min nodded. The 4 of them turned and disappeared. In the dim room, Yin Nuashing opened his eyes weakly. His blurry eyes scanned the darkness in front of him. He could not remember how many times he had fainted and then woke up. He vaguely remembered that there were several times when he was lying on the floor. It seemed that he was restless even after he fainted. He did not show up much during the soul conference, but he insisted on listening to the report every day until the end. However, he fainted immediately after it was over. Huey's guess was not wrong, but only half of it. At this time, because he was carrying 77 origin relics, his body was affected by the origin rules and origin energy that had been activated beyond his tolerance limit. His body and soul could not bear it anymore. In fact, he could not bear it anymore when he was carrying the 61st origin relic. He only managed to increase it to 77 with all his might. As for the reason why he put his body in contact with the origin relics, it had to do with another part the changes in his body and soul. Primordial chaos. The primordial chaos he had obtained in the fourth rank area. Earlier, before he left that area, he had slightly suppressed the evolution process because he had determined that the timing might not be good. At this moment, it was probably stimulated by the origin rule and could no longer hold back. The primordial chaos, the origin rule, and the origin rule, together with the large amount of void power that the former had seized when the primordial realm rift exploded, were causing trouble in his body. When he noticed that the primal chaos was becoming more active, it was already too late to strengthen the suppression. He might as well let it loose and let it come into contact with more of the primal chaos. He wanted to see what it could evolve into. Anyway, the result of combining the primal chaos and the primal chaos did not look bad. It could not possibly turn him into the primal heavenly god. All right, he was dreaming. However, the changes that happened might make his nature slightly closer to them. As for how much closer, he could not deduce it at all. If I'm swallowed by origin like this, in a daze, he looked at his hands that were constantly shaking. He wanted to force his palms to close. He thought that he was using a lot of force, but he only made his slender fingers bend a little. I have to stay awake. Stay awake for me. He stubbornly controlled his body that was gradually losing strength. He desperately wanted to turn around, but his body that was suspended in the air fell to the ground again. He stared blankly at the dark ceiling and could not help but laugh bitterly in his heart. This feeling his body losing control bit by bit, becoming unfamiliar little by little, no longer his original appearance, made him feel bitter. In the 139th era, the ancient era, in this very moment, he had the clearest memories of the three periods. The common memory was that he had turned himself from the origin into something that was neither human nor ghost, active and passive. Now that he thought about it, it did not seem that he had intended to do that. Although he said that he hated people, it was not to the extent that he had to separate himself from the race and become a class of his own. Thinking about it, he felt a little distressed. What was he doing? He seemed to have forgotten himself in his days, lost in the endless trouble that the void had caused him, and gradually lost his original intention. Speaking of which, what was his original intention? It seemed that he only intended to do it every day. I can't remember clearly. Forget it, I don't care. Besides, he was not stable from the beginning. Anyway, his nature was fickle. What was there to stay? He was just a troublemaker. But he still hoped for that kind of feeling. In the end of this era, turning the tide is a joke, that's all. It's just a dream. What's the point of struggling? It feels like I'm making things difficult for myself. Looking at the void, I can't just give up. There's still someone beside me. No one could do anything if I only care about what I say. But I don't care about what I have in my heart. There's no other way in this world. Arg, I can't take it anymore. My mind is in a mess, and even my consciousness is about to be devoured by chaos and origin. Chaotic thoughts are running around in my mind at the speed of light, and my consciousness is about to be drowned out by my own thoughts. In my mind, there seems to be a million little people jumping, shouting, and roaring with their lives on the line. The dust that brushed past my ears is like the sound of an earthquake in the void. My consciousness was about to collapse. Before his constantly shaking vision disappeared, he saw three things that were neatly placed on the ground side by side: a vase, a whale-shaped crystal sculpture, and a bronze hand warmer. He used the last strand of uncontrollable and unstable strength to control his body and threw himself at the three things. His head hit the crystal sculpture, and he fainted. In his chaotic consciousness, he heard countless muffled whispers. The noisy little people in his mind seemed to be trying their best to keep their voices down. They were talking, but it also sounded like they were praying. There were a few meaningless mutterings. What remained unchanged were the few remaining but extremely deep unwillingness, resentment, and regret. No matter how much time passed, the things they represented could not be forgotten. Those unfinished wishes and unfinished business could never be completed by them. No matter what existed, it could only be let go with the wind and vanish with time. Unforgettable. He was already familiar with it. He was already used to it. He was their listener. As he listened subconsciously, the chaos in his consciousness abruptly vanished. It was as if he had been startled awake from the deepest dream. Opening his eyes, he looked around. There was a gray mist. He was already used to it. He was already familiar with it. He did not feel lost when he came here again. I've come to find you. Chapter 1640. His entire body was shrouded in thick fog. Subconsciously, he could smell a large amount of water vapor. He walked in this place once again. He had already forgotten how many times he had set foot in this place, even though he could not tell that he had entered the same fog-shrouded place every time. His senses and cognition were very easily deceived. He was only a puny peak reciprocity cultivator. In front of those truly ancient existences, he was still a weak little being. Putting aside the fog, he really did have a feeling that he was moving forward. Every time he came here, it meant that he had taken a step forward. Every time, he was getting closer to the end of the journey in the fog. He was getting closer and closer. There was something waiting for him at the end of the journey. He calmly took a step forward. He walked forward fearlessly. With just one step, he felt like he had passed through a blurry boundary. The sound of wind chimes, ancient bells, and drums rang out in his ears as if they were accompanying his arrival. All right, he was just being crazy. It was just a simple accompaniment. It was not like he was in some high-end restaurant that would play music for the arrival of guests. Cough, cough. He had heard this melody once before. When he heard it again this time, he immediately determined where he was. He could not help but take a deep breath. The thick fog in front of him began to dissipate. The scenery in the distance gradually became clear. The earth, mountains, plains, and huge floating islands in the sky were like the splendid scenery of the clouds in the sky. In the center of the earth, there was a group of white palaces with a sacred aura. They were like the ancient palaces of the entire primordial realm, the continent of origin. If there were no accidents, what he saw this time should be the real deal. He did not panic when he set foot in this place again. In fact, he did not even have any emotional fluctuations this time. The last time he came here, he was still in a state of frenzy. The reason for this change was very simple. His worldview was brutally destroyed and then violently reshaped in the cloud continent. Now, he could calmly and peacefully look at the origins mess. Well, 50% of it was his mentality, and the other 50% was forcefully suppressed by himself. So, let's just pretend it didn't count. He looked around the real continent and compared it with the model of the continent of origin in his mind. He thought that he could find some small differences, at least in the terrain, but there was really no difference between the two. There was no difference in appearance or aura. Even the floating islands of the sequence were floating in the same place. It was as if they had set out to create two identical continents at the same time from the beginning. They did not hastily create a mirror image later. Ding! The crisp sound of the wind chimes rang through his soul, making Yin Nuashing a little stunned. This time, the sound of the wind chimes did not come from his continent. It came from the relic of origin on him. Subconsciously turning around to look at himself, Yin Nuashing was surprised to find that all the origin crystals on his body had disappeared. He had returned to his original appearance without so many fancy things. The swaying wind chimes were sometimes strong and sometimes weak. It was a very gentle and rhythmic sound. There seemed to be some accompaniment of the relic of origin in the middle, but it was very weak. Like the former, sometimes loud, sometimes low, Yin Nuashing stood here and studied for a while. Suddenly, he found something. It seemed that when he looked at the pure, white, sacred palace, the sound would become louder and louder. When he looked at other places, the sound would be slightly weaker. It seemed to be guiding him there. Where do you want me to go? Yin Nuashing asked himself. Ding! It was still the same crisp sound. In fact, there was no change in the syllables, but he could hear a faint response from it. Yin Nuashing scratched his head and let out a long sigh. This time, there was no resistance or unnecessary struggle. He lifted his feet and flew toward the palace where the heavenly god of origin lived. As he approached, the relic of origin in his body gradually reacted. At first, only the wind chimes were swaying, and a few others were playing accompaniment. Now, 77, no, 80 relic of origin gradually responded. There was a chaotic sound in his mind. He seemed to feel that everything in the world was humming with energy in his mind. It should have been a rather chaotic sound, but for some reason, it did not sound so chaotic. It was quite rhythmic. Well, it wasn't just the origin relic. Even the origin energy was faintly responding. More than 200 things in his body were happily beating gongs and drums, making a racket as if their lives depended on it. Although he didn't find it too noisy, the high-pitched response and the intense activity made him feel scared. He was afraid that some guy would suddenly jump out of his body and torment him to death. Naturally, there were other buildings on the continent of origin apart from the white jade-like palace. But when he looked at the other buildings, the latter would become transparent in 3 seconds and gradually hide in the air. The space was so clean that it was as if nothing had ever existed. Eyes, soul, spirit, consciousness, several methods of observation all gave the same result. He could barely see the appearance of those things that would disappear from the corner of his eyes, but only that palace. Well, that was a clear indication. The entire world was urging him to go to that pure white palace. Now is not the time to see the continent of origin. Yin breathed a long sigh and gave himself a reasonable explanation in his heart. This place was like the place where they left their images. They seemed to still exist here, knew of his arrival, watched his actions, took in his every move, every panic, and every slight change in his expression. They even controlled him and guided him to where he should go. The phantoms that remained in the world, after discarding their unwillingness, resentment, and regret, were engraved in the space, leaving only the same endless sentiments, reluctance, and regret. It was their immortal will, another kind of will that was engraved in the space apart from annihilating non-order. That was probably the meaning of this place, and probably the reason why they wanted him to see this place. Yin Nuashing shook his head and threw those strange thoughts aside. He then looked at other places and saw that they were hidden in space because of his gaze. He smiled helplessly. After that, he no longer slowed down because he wanted to observe other places. He simply used a spatial teleportation to throw himself in front of the pure white palace. Creak! He gently pushed open the door with both hands. The door had been closed for an unobservable amount of time, and the sound it made covered the swaying music on the continent. The hall was quiet, and when he passed through the door, he felt as if he had passed through a layer of light. The energy in his ears played a melody that rose in pitch and then quickly faded. Gently closing the door with both hands behind his back, he looked at the space of the hall in front of him. It was empty, quiet, and isolated from the music outside. It was the same as the last time he stepped into this place. The only difference was that he came here with the mentality of being in a hurry to be reincarnated, galloping past without stopping. This time, he walked slowly in the hall, slowly passing through the corridors and side halls. He even pushed open the window to look at the scenery outside with interest. Although the scenery disappeared after 3 seconds, it was not a problem. He wanted to have a peaceful mind. It was as if he had returned to the big house he lived in after traveling for many years. Naturally, he would take a slow walk around to calm his mind. Wait a minute, this was not his thought. This was the thought of the 200-plus troublemakers in his body. However, he did have the mentality of looking at the scenery, slowly wandering around. Anyway, they did not urge him, and he was not in a hurry to go to the main hall. He was sure that there would be some kind of shock later. He had to be prepared first, in case the ball of light under his chest suddenly exploded. A pleasant and light laughter suddenly penetrated his mind, causing Yin Nuashing to shiver and break out in a cold sweat. He turned around abruptly and scanned the entire room. The side hall was quiet. The furniture on display was spotless and had been here for countless years. The doors on the left and right walls were also tightly shut. The hall was silent. The only sound was his breathing and the chatter of the 200-plus things in his body. However, only he could hear the latter. Even so, he felt that this was definitely not an illusion. This could not be an illusion. He was 100% sure that he heard a happy chuckle just now. It was the chuckle of a girl. When he turned around, he saw that it was silent. He had goosebumps. He swallowed his saliva and carefully moved toward the door. At this moment, he missed the noisy girls who lived in his soul. If they were around, he would not have to be so scared. At this moment, he thought of a terrible thing. The gods of origin were a group of existences that could scare him at any moment, especially her. Well, although the voice just now had nothing to do with her, the tone was different. After taking a deep breath, Yin Washing slowly pushed the door of the side hall open. He stuck his head out and looked around. The long corridor was empty and silent. He then pulled his head back and looked at the hall again. There was still no one. The atmosphere was fine just now. Why did it suddenly become like seeing a ghost? Yin Washing hugged himself and shuddered. He quickly went out of the hall and closed the door silently. He walked quickly in the direction of the main hall. Forget it. I better go to the main hall quickly. If I delay any longer, I think I will fall sick from the fright. Well, the ghosts who live here, I am just an innocent passerby. Please be magnanimous and don't come out for no reason. After a few days, when it is quieter, I will burn some incense for you. Let's just pretend that nothing happened here, okay? If you don't say anything, I will take it that you agree. The empty corridor echoed with his rapid footsteps. The energy mark that he left behind sneakily observed the situation after he left. However, it did not find anything unusual until it naturally dissipated. This made Yin Washing a little relieved. He thought that the thing might just be passing by and laughed out loud, which scared him. Anyway, it was still peaceful now. There should be no problem, right? This time, without her energy mark to guide him, he walked all the way to the main hall in the deepest part of the main hall. He looked up at the huge door of the main hall. He stretched out his hands and pressed on the door. After hesitating for a while, he put down his left hand and gently knocked on the door with his right hand. Of course, there was no response. Crazy. With a self-deprecating smile, Yin Washing shook his head and gently pushed the door open. Then, he poked his head in and muttered to himself, "I am coming in. Is there anyone?" Nonsense. This place had been abandoned for God knows how many years. How could there still be anyone here? If he continued to be so crazy, even if this place was not haunted, he would create a haunted house atmosphere. Be careful. That door is a little broken. You must be gentle when you close it, or else... Clang! There, or else it will be like this. It is so noisy. Yin Washing's forehead was covered in white sweat. It was so noisy because you scared me. Just now, he politely knocked on the door and asked if there was anyone inside. In the end, there was no response, so he walked in without permission. Yes, he was scared. He was really scared. Just as he turned around to close the door, a sentence suddenly came from behind him. It was a sentence that he could understand. If it were not for the fact that there was no sea, he would have jumped in on the spot. With cold sweat on his forehead, he turned around. The main hall was still the same. There were no decorations. It was just a huge hall with a few rows of pillars. There was also no phantom floating in the sky in the depths of the hall like he saw the other day. There was only a person standing in front of him. The two people were less than 5 feet apart. I see. You have been here once. The place you went last time seemed to be a pocket dimension that we kept as a backup. You have remodeled that place. Well done. Standing in front of him was a figure that only reached up to his chest. It was a shiny, miniature version. He could tell that it was a girl wearing a grand long dress with neat bangs, just by looking at the outline of her face. Yes, he could not tell anything. Yin Washing couldn't help but size her up. Finally, his gaze fell on her white face. Of course, he couldn't see any expression on her face. Her voice sounded directly in his mind, and he directly understood the meaning of that sentence. This also saved him the trouble of not being able to understand the language. The last time he came, he had to borrow Jingyun to translate their conversation. You care about my appearance? Yin Washing was shocked. A little. You can read my thoughts directly? Don't worry, I won't look at your past. She stared at him for a while and suddenly nodded as if she had confirmed something. Welcome, the one who is favored. We have been waiting for you for a long time. Us? The ball of light in Yin Washing's heart shook violently again. He almost fainted because he had run into the wrong place. The one whose name he could not hear should be her. The one whom she favored. Damn it, the one who was favored. Damn it. The direction of the mistake was too ridiculous. It was as if she had run him from a near-Earth planet to a far-Earth planet. If she had not controlled her strength well, she might have even sent him out of the star system, and he would wander aimlessly in the empty and lonely stars until the moment of his death. Speaking of which, this was all because of a mistake on his part. Why are you heavenly origin gods paying attention to him for no reason? He's just an ordinary heavenly origin god. At the very least, he's just an ordinary heavenly origin god in front of them. What's there to pay attention to? Could it be because of her? Your thoughts are very strange. Did I say something that made you feel bad? She seemed to frown and said in a flat voice, "No, it's my problem." The impact was a little serious. She tilted her head and looked at Yin Nuashing indifferently. After a moment, she turned around and walked into the depths of the palace. "Follow me." Yin Nuashing reflexively followed her. "Oh, but where are we going?" In the depths of the main hall, he thought that she was going to bring him here, but it seemed that she was just passing by. She reached out and gently brushed the wall in the deepest part of the main hall, and the wall in front of her suddenly became transparent, exposing the outside sky in front of his eyes. There was a passage made of golden light that stretched forward from the ground under her feet, slanting towards the sky. She lifted her feet and walked on the golden passage, tilting her head to look at Yin Nuashing. Only then did he hurriedly follow. The passageway cast by golden light. If he was not mistaken, it seemed to lead to the floating island in the sky. Yin Nuashing could not help but smile bitterly. Even so, he could have just gone there. Why did she have to lead him to the palace and give him a fright? The floating island is cast by 2 layers of space. Only from here can you go to the other layer of space. "Oh, I see," Yin Nuashing replied in a daze. Then he smiled bitterly. He was still not used to having his mind read. You said that you have been waiting for me for a long time. Can I ask who you are specifically?" He could not hear their voices once they opened their mouths. He could not recognize their names at all. However, it seemed that there were only 4 of them, which made him feel slightly more at ease. He had thought that he would really have to face 1 or 200 origin heavenly gods. That was truly unimaginable. He might have fainted from nervousness. The others are not here right now. If you want to see them, you might have to wait patiently for a while. Yin Nuashing, if possible, I don't want to see them. Don't let so many strange people appear in front of him again. My heart can't take it. That's hard to say. Everyone is quite interested in you. When they will meet you depends on their mood. After all, you're someone who is favored. This has never happened in countless years. Yin Nuashing covered his head with a grief-stricken expression. He really shouldn't have gone to the void crack that day. He shouldn't have had such thoughts. Who exactly did he offend among the heavenly gods of origin? Did he attract the attention of the gods just because he had a relationship with her that he didn't even know if it was solid? Speaking of which, when he saw where she stood during the meeting that day, he could more or less guess her position. He vaguely knew the general idea, but did not know the specifics. However, it did not matter much whether he knew or not. After all, they were the origin heavenly gods. She suddenly stopped and turned around. She raised her head slightly and looked directly into his eyes. "You know who she is. Otherwise, you would not have come here." Heavenly destruction god? This was the only thing he knew. Yes. Isn't that her divinity, divine title? Does knowing this count as knowing? Yes. Divinity is the name of a god. Although it does not mean that it is everything, it is the only name we need to walk the world. There is no need to say anything else. Yin Nuashing, it was just like how not many people in the divine realm knew who he was. However, when it came to the observer, everyone in the divine realm definitely knew who the observer was. It was just that they did not know who he was. That was probably the extent of it. That is the extent of it. Yin Nuashing smiled bitterly. After a moment, his expression changed drastically. The divine realm. He had always wanted to ask about the divine realm. Why did the Emperor appoint a miserable guy like him to be that thing? And why did he have to be the god for life? Could it be that this was also because of some changes she made when she met him now in the 30th era? Was he going to talk about the troublesome topic of fate? We're here. Just as a bunch of questions and complaints were about to burst out, the woman walking in front of him stopped and stood by the side of the passage. Only then did he notice that they had unknowingly arrived at this floating island. If you have anything to say or ask, you can ask for yourself. I think it would be better if she explained it to you personally. After saying this, she quietly looked down at the land below and did not say anything else. Hearing this, Yin Nuashing nodded lightly at her and once again stepped onto this floating island. If he had to describe his feelings, it would be nervousness. Yes, very nervousness. Right now, he was very, very nervous. What was this called? Meeting in life. That's right. They had crossed countless distances and crossed countless times to meet here. He did not know what kind of feelings he should bring to this meeting. Before he could sort out his emotions, by the time he reacted, he had already walked into the plaza. When he came back to his senses, he saw that it was still a slightly familiar place. The golden throne in the depths was still there. Nothing had changed. Everything was still the same as when they first met. The only difference was that in front of the throne, there stood a figure emitting a white light. Her back was facing this plaza. Her back was facing him. He vaguely remembered this back. Bright crystal, real life. That's right, it was the bright crystal that he had discovered in the 139th era. He had seen her guarding the tomb like a shadow in the origin world. That was the real origin world, the origin continent. It was not a pocket dimension, nor was it a perfect and beautiful reflection of this place. It was a real, scorched earth. I'm here. Yin Nuashing walked forward and stood 10 meters behind her, speaking softly. The person in front of the throne raised her head slightly. Her clear and gentle voice carried a slight sense of ethereality and energy. You're here. Chapter 1641. The sound of the wind was still the same. The throne was lonely and empty, as if something was missing. It made Yin Nuashing feel incomplete. Out of the 4 times he had seen it, this was the only time he felt this way. The sound of the wind chime reverberated in his ears again. It was no longer crisp, but a little dull. It sounded like it was covered with a piece of cloth. It was low and mellow. The sound that originated from the entire land of origin had a slight change at this moment. Only the tone of the voice did not change. It seemed to be telling him what happened here from the beginning. Yin Nuashing saw that she had no intention of turning around. He thought for a while and took a few steps forward. He walked up the stairs and slowly stopped 2 meters behind her. He glanced at the throne from the corner of his eyes and then looked straight at her back. It was completely sparkling. Sure enough, the shadow that stayed there at that time was left by her. There was a bit of silence in the air. After the two of them said that sentence to indicate that their consciousness existed here, there was no movement. Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes, and his eyeballs rolled around randomly, aimlessly. He had also imagined what it would be like to meet with her. He had thought of many scenarios, but he had never thought that they would meet here. The real meeting was in the continent of origin. It was quite mysterious when he thought about it. No, it's not a real meeting. The soft and slightly ethereal voice rang directly in his heart. Yin Nuashing was stunned. He fixed his eyes and saw the person in front of him slowly turning around. It made him a little nervous. But the next second, he smiled bitterly. Her face was white. Only her nose was in the middle of her face. He could not see anything else. It was completely white. Ah, it was expected. The girl who brought him up just now could not see what she looked like. Then there was no reason for him to see her face. Well, he did not expect anything. He really did not expect anything. But they could read his mind directly. He was not used to it. By the way, what did she say just now? What do you mean? This doesn't count as a real meeting. Could it be that there's something else? She nodded softly. The me and us that exist here is nothing more than a shadow. A shadow born from your thoughts and thoughts as zero. Shadow, shadow. Since when did his will become so strong that he could even project the heavenly god of origin from the river of time? Wait a minute. Why do you seem to have heard of this before? Thinking about it carefully, If you were to turn back time 100 million years at that time, the abyssal death mist had not broken through the first void seal. At that time, he was in the distorted world, in the graveyard of gods and demons, and that demonic shadow. It seemed to have been born because of Chong Kong and the others. Could it be? It's as you think. But judging these things did not seem to be meaningful, right? Why did he start to think about the meaning of this world again? Yin Nuoxing slapped himself hard in his soul and shook his dizzy head. However, I didn't expect you to really come here. She turned around and continued to stare at the throne. Were you very resistant at the beginning? At the mention of this topic, Yin Nuoxing's cheeks twitched. He took a deep breath, and a stomach full of resentment was about to burst out. Then, he was instantly discouraged. He suddenly realized that, well, he could not say anything. If he wanted to complain, he would encounter all those big and small things because of them, those things that tormented him to death. He did not expect that when he really wanted to say something, he would find that he could not say anything. Forget it, it doesn't matter. In the end, Yin Nuoxing ended the struggle in his heart with a long sigh. Even if there are a lot of things that I want to say, I don't know how to say them. Even if there are things that I want to ask, it is difficult for me to open my mouth. I have already made up my mind. You have made up your mind to die? Yes. He nodded calmly and laughed softly. He quietly let go of the countless grievances in his heart. Perhaps those grievances were not as heavy as he thought. When he really saw the person's shadow in front of him, he did not expect to feel a little relieved in his heart, although he himself did not know where this relief came from. Are you going to press it down just like that? She tilted her head and glanced at him. If you really have something to say, you don't have to hold it in. No need. Yin Nuoxing shook his head. Even if I say it, it won't change anything. Just let me go on like this. Is that so? Then let's skip this topic. She turned her head and was silent for a while. Then she said softly, the cloud continent, the things that we left behind, they were originally a whole. They are our... There was no sound behind her. She felt a little strange that his thoughts had disappeared. She turned around gently and saw that Yin Nuoxing had fallen to the ground. He seemed to have fainted. His consciousness and soul are too tired. A faint and deep male voice suddenly sounded. She tilted her head and looked to the side. A white and slightly sturdy figure walked out of the space and squatted in front of Yin Nuoxing. He reached out and touched his forehead. It was already very tiring to deal with the fragments that we left behind. Relying on the source chaos to complete the evolution of the soul, and at the same time to form this in advance, it took too much effort. To be able to walk in front of you and say a few words, perseverance. You should have something to say, but I don't know why he let it go. She nodded and continued the second half of the sentence. She also walked over and squatted in front of him. She reached out and brushed away the long hair in front of his face. Her palm suddenly trembled slightly. The flickering red and black light gathered in her palm and turned into a broken red and black crystal. It's broken. The young girl slowly walked over from the edge of the floating island. Seeing the broken red and black crystal in her hand, the white light on her body trembled slightly. Her voice was a little serious. They or them, who knows? She seemed to sneer. She waved her hand and placed the crystal into Yin Nuoxing's soul. She sighed deeply. Perhaps I was already affected at the very beginning. I just didn't know. The young girl crossed her arms and looked at the guy lying on the ground. So, he is the one you were looking for? I'm not sure, but he is probably the one. She replied softly, I don't know how many years have passed since the first time we met. We are just shadows left in the world. Some things are hard to be sure. Since this item is on him, then it is most likely him. The first time? The young man was slightly stunned. He seemed to have thought of something. Oh, are you talking about that time when you suddenly did that strange action during the meeting? She nodded. Her gaze was fixed on Yin Nuoxing's soul. The young girl confirmed that the red and black crystal had completely melted. She sighed. It's a long road. Are you sure he can walk on it? Just let him walk on it? Since he has already come this far, why not try to believe? She stretched her arms and said faintly, "The resolution to walk on it." "That's what he said. Do you intend to put him under our name?" "It's hard to say. He is an existence that makes me feel unexpected." She whispered softly. She paused several times as if she was constantly deliberating. Although there are arrangements, in the end, it can't be finalized. Even you have things that you can't be sure of. She tilted her head and glanced at the young man as if she was speechless. She skipped the topic and said faintly, "We are crowned as the origin of the world, standing beside us. This responsibility is too heavy and too harsh. He should not replace us. We should not make decisions on our own. That would be too cruel. At least, we should follow his wishes. In short, let him walk on it slowly, right? Perhaps we will see the answer at the end. It's too early to say these things now." The young man scratched his head and looked at Yin Nuashing again, but it's really amazing that he can completely mold this place. The clan in his memory used the lives of the clan as the skeleton to mold its shadow. We are in the same situation as it, but only he alone. This was a very powerful thought. Perhaps even he himself did not think of it. Although he always talked about the origin and those damn things, he really missed them in his heart. Perhaps he just wanted to see them, or perhaps it was just a kind of spirit that was entrusted due to confusion. There was certainly a little resentment in his heart, but it was not as deep as he imagined. In short, it was probably this situation that allowed them to manifest. He felt that it was very inconceivable. She glanced at the young man and reached out her hand to touch Yun Nuashing's forehead. "See for yourself." "Ah." The young man turned his gaze. "What's so strange?" This thing. Could this be the sea of consciousness?" The girl heard him and suddenly turned her head. "Isn't that just a thing that exists in theory? It should only exist in an illusory fantasy. Although it's just a prototype, it is indeed that thing." The young man nodded. "I didn't expect that something that only exists in theory would really manifest in the world." "Ah, I see. No wonder we would appear here in advance. This is a broken land that was born by relying on the sea of consciousness. Therefore, he alone is enough to manifest this place. His yearning alone is almost equivalent to the yearning of countless lives. This thing is not a good thing. Are we just going to leave it here?" She looked up at the young man and then down at Yin Nuashing. She shook her head. "It's neither a blessing nor a curse. Let's keep it." After the three of them were silent for a moment, she waved her hand and lifted Yin Nuashing up. "All right, I'll bring him down first. His soul needs to rest, and the fragments we left behind need to be dealt with." The young man and the girl nodded and watched as she brought Yin Nuashing away. The young man looked at the backs of the two who were gradually moving away and could not help but say, "But they do look a little alike." Because of his words, the shadows of the two appeared in the mind of the girl who was about to leave. They flickered and quickly overlapped with each other, causing her to stop in her tracks. Indeed, the flickering composition in his soul is very similar. Don't you think that their personalities are also a little similar? The young man smiled. Sometimes they're equally reckless, just like, so, that's why he was chosen. The young girl sighed softly. However, time was truly a mysterious and complicated thing. Even now, she still couldn't figure out who had chosen who. Or perhaps it was actually the two of them who were getting closer to each other. Where is everyone? Somewhere else. The girl walked forward without looking back. Everyone is waiting in their own place. Being derived from the chaos, it might need some time to stabilize a little. Or perhaps it might need some time to calm down. The young man held the back of his head and laughed. This world, shadows, after all, were just shadows. Some things that were engraved in the void could not be changed. They're matters. Hell, whatever. The fog in the distance gradually dispersed. The two of them stopped and looked into the distance. The fog in the land of origin had completely dissipated. The fog outside the land of origin was rolling as if something was brewing. It was gradually breeding something that did not originally belong to this space. It would be great if it could be a slightly better ending this time. His eyelids were still a little heavy. He tried his best to open a slit to look out. Everything was very blurry. There was always a certain degree of faint light in the darkness. It was not enough to make the whole world look very dark. The faint light that flickered in his soul made Yin Nuashing turn his attention in a daze. He lowered his head and took a look. A line of words was engraved in the light that he could not understand, but he could understand it directly. The fragments of the cloud continent were originally one. Waving his hand to make the line of words in front of him dissipate, Yin Nuashing slowly breathed and sat up from the bed in a daze. The shadow of the sun was already hanging on the horizon, and the color of the sky was an absolute darkness shrouded by black clouds. He was in the cloud continent, and the conversation just now, everything in the origin continent seemed to be something that he experienced in a dream. There was no sense of reality, but that sentence engraved in the original divine language let him know that this was not his whimsical dream, but something that happened in reality. Just like that demonic shadow, manifesting in the form of chaos. My thoughts. Yin Nuashing laughed bitterly. Only God knew what was going on. He was still a little confused and couldn't come back to his senses. Whatever happened in that world, their matters, he didn't understand at all. But since it had happened, then so be it. Even their shadows seemed to have a lot of limitations. First of all, they were not real life. They were just a kind of afterimage that was born from the heart and supplemented by countless primordial laws. Although this shadow could leave traces and have a certain influence on him, this influence, Yin Nuashing looked at his body. All the primordial crystals had disappeared. There was a mass of chaotic light surging in his soul. The transformation was still ongoing and had not solidified yet. She said that they were one. If he wanted to see its true form, he would have to collect all the primordial relics first. In addition, there was a delicate red and black mark on his forehead. It was a diamond-shaped mark that had melted in the flame. The tiny flame and the diamond-shaped mark were vivid and lifelike. From a distance, it looked like a single flame. Well, it was not the feeling of seeing a flame, but a destructive will. Her mark? Yin Nuashing smiled bitterly. It seemed that the piece of her divine crystal had been pressed into his soul. He glanced at it. Well, it had completely melted, leaving only a mass of red and black light that gave him a feeling of imperfections. Just one look was enough to make him give up completely. Since he had confirmed that the thing had completely merged with his soul, there was nothing to struggle about. It seemed that he could only be busy looking for the fragments of her divine carrier in the void. What a busy life. Speaking of which, he fainted in a daze. Before he woke up, he seemed to have heard some vague words. Well, he could not tell clearly. He did not know what they were talking about when he fainted. Something about looking for someone, something about that. He did not know where the space in them that were created by his mind were hidden. He could not find any trace of them in his soul. Well, it felt weird, as if there were 100 or 200 undead living in his head. He shuddered and smiled bitterly. What was going on? Things had developed to this point. It was not as simple as just being weird. This was simply, there was no way to understand. Whenever he tried to understand the truth of this place, his mind would feel dizzy. Forget it. I don't care. Let him be. Next, I need to confirm the source chaos. Well, the aura that carries the law of origin is evolving. Well, I have a feeling that it has temporarily come to an end. However, I can't tell what happened at all. The aura of origin on his body seems to have become a little thicker. According to this trend, if I let it slowly evolve, I might become an existence that is even closer to them. Speaking of which, should I have discussed something with her instead of acting cool and saying, "Hey, what's the matter? I can solve it. Forget it. I don't care about this anymore. There's really nothing to talk about." Speaking of which, why did he appear on the bed? Before he fainted, he remembered that he had fainted after hitting his head on the crystal statue. Logically speaking, he should still be lying on the ground. Forget it. I don't care. It's not something I need to care about. A shadow that remains in the world. A trace that remains in the world. Yin Nuashing murmured softly. She let out a long sigh of relief. First, I need to collect all the fragments, the relic of origin. As for the rest, let's talk about it later. It was probably not a relationship where he could meet her often. However, she might occasionally appear in his dreams. If there was anything, he would talk about it the next time they met. This time, he would not act cool. Chapter 1642. Out of nowhere, there was a dimension built by his own thoughts and the fragments of the primordial god. How should he put it? It sounded creepy. But when he thought about it carefully, he felt that there was nothing wrong with it. Ever since he met the demonic shadow that day and heard the answer to why it appeared in the graveyard of gods and demons, he might have been mentally prepared. It was a very vague mental preparation. At that time, he might not have known what he was preparing for until they met at this moment. Well, just like what her shadow said, he had not really met her yet. There must be some differences between her and her shadow. In terms of time, her shadow began to solidify from the moment it was born. Perhaps it was because it was imprinted with part of her existence. But as for her real body, well, he did not know where she was or what she was doing at the moment. The two of them would probably develop in different ways. After all, one was her real body, while the other was just a body of thoughts. The essence was just the combination of thoughts and fragments, which was different from the real body. It was probably because of the relationship between the two soul avatars that Crescent Moon had created. Him and Zero, who had returned to the Age of Darkness, probably had this kind of relationship. The two of them had been different from each other ever since they parted ways, and what they had achieved in the future was also very different. Well, let's skip this topic and let his mind return to the reality of this moment. Yun Nuashing had seen the direction of the evolution of the primordial chaos. After coming into contact with the laws of origin and assimilating it, she planned to evolve him in this direction. As for the future, he really did not know what he would become in the end. This was the clear thought that he had sorted out in the 3 days after he woke up. Of course, he did not just stay in bed thinking about it. He also dealt with a new batch of primordial relics. Originally, when he came into contact with a certain number of primordial relics, even if he came into contact with inactive primordial relics, it would cause great damage to his body and soul. His body's capacity had long been overloaded. But after that dream, he did not know what her shadow did to him when he was unconscious. The burden had disappeared. At this time, when he came into contact with the primordial relics again, he did not have the feeling of dying like a few days ago. It wasn't a bad thing to suffer less. He wasn't a masochist who really liked to torture himself. The main thing was that he was very curious about what had happened to his body. Unfortunately, there was no way to see her shadow now. He could only suppress this thought and pretend that nothing had happened. Digression. He had really collected a complete set of tea sets. This was sorted out when he was tidying up the primordial relics. He was stunned like a statue on the spot and did not recover for a long time. And when he recovered, he placed them on the table. At this time, sitting at the table, Yunuashing fiddle with colorful teacups, teapots, and a teapot. Although they were in the same style, they were dyed in 7 or 8 different colors. Well, probably because of the primordial energy, or to distinguish which one was who. Of course, there were so many of them. Every single one of them was a primordial relic, and including the teapot was dyed primordial relics. Holding the teacup in his hand, he studied it. There were no patterns. It appeared to be an ordinary 3-finger-wide teacup made of jade. It was cold to the touch, and he could feel the surge and resonance of the primordial energy and primordial precepts. Aside from recovering his body, he really could not do anything else. Moreover, looking at the tea set made his heart itch. It was as if after millions of years of painstakingly collecting a tea set scattered across the void, he had to burn incense, bathe, and change his clothes to brew a pot of tea. Ah, tea lovers would know what that meant, which was why he really used the tea set to brew a pot of tea and took a sip. This mellow, this mood, well, he could not say anything else. In short, mortals would not have the fortune to enjoy it, not even gods. The cup of tea contained faint primordial energy and primordial precepts, and 1 cup down his throat would rot his intestines and stomach. Setting aside the indecent tea set, he was still going through the primordial relics he had collected over the past few days. Most of them had been put away without even looking at them clearly. He was in agony at the time, and his spirit was dispirited. How could he have the time to look at so many things in detail? He simply shoved them into his body and was done with it, before continuing to endure the next round of pain. It was already fortunate that he did not break down at that time. After all, most of the 97 primordial relics were certainly home decorations. Those that were not, such as a tea set, trinkets for the body, pots and pans. Oh, that was not there. That seemed to be the bottom line. There was no kitchen utensils at present, but whenever there was a pot or a basin, his next step would be to collect a complete set of kitchen utensils. Then he would use them to cook a table of dishes, brew a pot of tea, and drink it himself. That was not something that others could use. Wait a minute, this train of thought was not right. Ugh. Yin Nuoxing pressed his head and shook it gently. The light on his face dimmed a little. The damage had been reduced, but it was not gone. The source of chaos was brewing the next stage of evolution and mobilizing the energy in his body. Now that he had collected more than a dozen primordial relics, he still felt mentally and physically exhausted. But compared to the half-dead state he was in before, this level of exhaustion now only needed a little rest. TSK. Damn it, I'm tired again. Lowering his head and shaking from side to side, Yin Nuoxing could not help but smack his lips. The situation now was like a fragile human shell. He felt tired after moving for a while, and he would die if he did not rest for a few days. 70 to 80% of his body's energy was used to maintain basic consumption. What a fragile shell. He did not intend to lie down and sleep at the moment, but his body was so weak. It was better to find a place to lie down and not think about anything. Just as he was about to do so, there was a soft knock on the door that had been closed for a few days. It was so soft that it did not disturb the people in the room. It seemed that the person just wanted to see if the person in the room had woken up. The fatigue and laziness that spread to half of his body made Yin Nuoxing unwilling to get up and walk over. He simply waved his hand and opened the door. The person outside the door even exclaimed softly, as if he was a little surprised. He looked at the dark and dim room that looked like a basement and hesitated for a few seconds before walking in. He did not make a sound when he walked. Yin Nuoxing sensed a faint golden light in the corner of his eyes and heard a faint energy buzzing in his ears. He did not need to look up to know who had come in. Before he could think of what to say, the little angel had already seen him lying on the bed like a salted fish. She could not help but be stunned. You? Why do you look so haggard? Yin Nuoxing tried to raise his head, but his neck was so lazy that he just raised his head slightly and buried his face in the bed again. After all, it's this kind of thing. What's going on outside? Why did you come here? The little angel shook her head and sat down by the bed. Her white wings stretched out and covered him. Her jade-like hands gently gathered his long black hair that scattered on the bed like black petals. I saw that your flame of life was flickering. I was a little worried, so I came to see you, although you seem to be fine now. Oh, Yin Nuoxing responded softly. I also brought other relics of origin over. There are 10, or more than 20 of them. I didn't count them. Yin Nuoxing. Most of the relics of origin are in a state of being placed. Only a few of them are active or rioting. You have dealt with most of them. There are only a few left in other places. You may have to go there yourself. Yin Nuoxing. I will really die of overwork. This way of dying is too ridiculous. Can you let me cry for a while? The little angel nodded gently and turned around to lie on the bed. She folded her wings and pulled Yin Nuoxing into her arms. Please. Yin Nuoxing. He was obviously joking. He didn't know how many years it had been since he cried. How could he cry over such a thing? Well, it was very warm and comforting. Since he might fall asleep lying like this, Yin Nuoxing struggled a little and broke free from the gentle embrace. Then, he told the little angel what happened a few days ago in detail. The little angel listened quietly and acted as a qualified listener. She only said a few words at the important points and pointed out a few things that a certain guy in a state of mind might have overlooked. However, the disappearance of the origin is something that is destined in this world. We have always thought that the origin is gone forever. Now it seems that maybe we will have a chance to meet again in the future, said the little angel. Yin Nuashing stared blankly. Why? The demonic shadow in the graveyard of gods and demons said, "See you next time," but it also said that it was already dead. So, do you think it will come back to life? The little angel shrugged. It was hard to say. This was related to the same generation as the god of origin. Other than the god of origin himself, no one could say for sure about the things that the god of origin and the others had dealt with. Reincarnation and resurrection. Such things were not uncommon. The god of origin himself had reincarnated hundreds of millions of times, so it was not surprising that others had reincarnated once as well. While that was the case for now, it would be a little serious if it really happened. They would meet again in the void after a dozen epochs, with two groups of people pinning each other down in the void and pummeling each other. It would definitely be much more exciting than the void sealing circle. Still, there was no memory of such a scene in the ending, which meant that it probably did not happen, and there was no need to worry about those groundless things. Listening to the girl's series of calm conjectures and analysis, Yin Oshing's expression gradually became serious. However, he did not expect that the last sentence would shatter his thoughts into pieces. He suddenly deflated and could not help but smile bitterly. This conjecture, well, it was indeed terrifying. However, it was not completely impossible. It was not surprising that anything could happen in the void. This time, they had to face a group of guys who were completely fooling around with the laws of the void. Even the heavens did not know what was going to happen. Even if something did happen, it would happen according to their thoughts. It was already very impressive that the mortals could survive in the violent confrontation between the two sides. Oh, right. At this time, they were also mortals. This level of battle was not something that could be watched by those below the realm of Yuanshi. Fortunately, there was no such thing happening in the void. Judging from the current rules of the void, no one could get involved. After the conversation, Yin Oshing stuffed the 21 origin relics brought by the little angel back into his body. His face was so haggard that it almost lost its light. "You're pushing yourself too hard." The little angel rebuked him. She grabbed his hair and shook his head from side to side. "There's still some time. You don't have to be so anxious." Yes, there was still time. Less than 10 days had passed. 10 days was not even 1/6 of a month in the Yunduan continent. Yin Nuashing held her hand with a bitter smile and said softly, "I can't not force it. I feel uneasy, and it's in this situation now. And some things are relative. If I don't force it, others will force themselves." The little angel frowned. Yin Nuashing shook his head. "If I don't force myself, I won't be able to play here. Absolute disadvantage. Unknown enemies. The power of the mythological era. We can't think of a second solution to this situation. Since the most important part is given to me, you can only force yourself to death." She sighed softly. "I'm worried, but I'm also worried. I hate that things are out of control. I have to find a way to salvage the situation. Only in this way can we slightly regain control of the situation." And Yin Nuashing was silent for a while. He shook his head. "I don't know if it's because of the contact with them, but I feel a haze from the Yunduan continent that I've never felt before. So we need to speed up. It's unfortunate to be involved in this kind of thing, but it's also fortunate that we discovered their plan at the beginning of the implementation." Yin Nuashing let out a long sigh. Suddenly, he raised his head and reached out his hand to touch the little angel. Seeing that, she leaned forward and placed her face in his palm. "If there is an afterlife, I really hope that I can go to a place where I don't have to think about these troublesome things anymore. Whether it is the observer or the inheritor, I will leave it to others. I will just bring all of you to a small place and live a simple life." The little angel was silent. "Afterlife. This life is not over yet. What's the point of talking about an afterlife?" Yes. Yin Nuashing smiled bitterly. "What's more, an afterlife? Don't you know what an afterlife is like? From the beginning to the end, his life and his reincarnation process did not have the words a good beginning and a good end. He carried two kinds of order and carried a heavy burden on his body. Even if it was just a dream, he was unwilling to let go. He carried all of it on his body and staggered forward. He carried this life, these countless reincarnations and countless lives together. If I'm not crazy, I'll definitely make this Dayuan realm tremble because of this heavy reincarnation. Her hand gently pressed on the face of a guy who was talking to himself and suddenly fell asleep. The little angel sighed softly and murmured softly, "Afterlife. The future, our future. In what form should it be?" Time passed by unwittingly. A month, 65 days, was not considered long in normal times. However, for the Yunwan continent at this time, this month was the most difficult month in history. Even though there was a small creations barrier that protected the other lands except for the origin land, the darkness that pervaded the entire world prevented the sun from shining on the land for a month. Every day, when one opened and closed their eyes, they could only see complete darkness. They could not tell whether it was morning or night. If it were not for the night watch, they probably would not know how long they had lived for. Well, it sounded serious, but in fact, when one looked at the sky, they could still see the dim shadow of the sun hidden behind the dark clouds. They could more or less determine whether it was day or night. On the other hand, the Yunwan continent that had been shrouded by the non-order energy for a month was almost dead. Although the small creations barrier isolated the non-order energy's direct influence on this area, the environment, the Yunwan continent's rule power was still under the control of the non-order energy. It was already very rare that no one had suddenly died because of the non-order energy. However, the plants on the land, as well as the wild beasts and magical beasts, had all lost their vitality. They were shrouded in the non-order energy environment and were affected by the non-order energy. For a long time, other than the life forms with a higher level of life, the rest could not withstand it. If this situation continues, well, let's not talk about a final battle. Just by wasting time, the remaining areas that have finally stabilized with great difficulty will fall into another kind of panic. Before the battle starts, all the lower-level life forms in the Yunwan continent will slowly die. Moreover, I feel that it's about time that someone discovered this situation. I'm just afraid that they will spread it to other places. In the ice region, Jihan Xiao could not help but sigh as he looked at the entire Yunwan continent. Finally, he looked at the Gangyuan continent. The aura of chaos in the Gangyuan continent is getting stronger and stronger. I can feel that it contains a very terrifying danger. Hearing his words, everyone who had already finished their task and gathered here felt their hearts sink. They stared at the Gangyuan continent with gloomy eyes. It was a situation that made them gnash their teeth, but they could only continue to gnash their teeth. We're all stalling for time. We all need time to complete some things. Hui slowly walked forward and waved his hand to project the Gangyuan continent in front of them. A huge energy barrier enveloped the entire Gangyuan continent. Outside, it was the energy tower array that they had spent a month to strengthen. That would be the first line of defense. However, as for how effective it would be, this was hard to say. Looking at it like this, it's really useless and aggrieved. The middle-aged man gritted his teeth and said in a low voice. The aggrieved tone in his voice made everyone grit their teeth. It was impossible to just wait for a month. They had to settle all the ancient relics, deal with the power of order, and arrange everything. They also tried to attack the Gangyuan continent's barrier. However, after attacking for 2 days, they returned without success. Let's wait a little longer. I feel lucky that we didn't tear the barrier apart that day. He scratched his head in distress. I only agreed to that operation because I was a little anxious. Without foam, we couldn't do anything. Some words should be said in reverse. For example, although they were only entrenched in the Gangyuan continent and seemed to have surrounded the Gangyuan continent, in reality, the situation should be reversed. They could temporarily stabilize the situation and prevent anything from happening. As for attacking, well, that day would come, but they would have to wait for a while. They had to wait for the person with the strongest spear in the void to come out. We turned his head and looked behind. I think it's about time. Based on Feng's impatient personality, he should be ready after forcing himself for a month. We're also fully prepared, Jihan Xiao said with a serious expression. In the next second, his face collapsed and he smiled bitterly. We've been fully prepared for 20 days. Now we're cooped up in the same spot and growing mushrooms. Everyone sighed. Hui shook his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. His eyes flickered as he looked at the Ganyuan continent. Xing Lu and the others were guarding the line of defense. They were only waiting for someone to come out and shout for the entire army to attack. Then, they would work together to tear down the Ganyuan continent's barrier. Foam, he sighed. Compared to worrying about the passage of time, he was more worried about whether Foam would break himself or something. It could not be helped. That guy was too scary when he played with his life. Time. He suddenly had a scary thought. After taking such a long time, could Foam be preparing? Just as he thought of this terrifying idea, the sound of someone running came from behind him. Everyone turned around and saw a little girl in a green dress running over in a hurry. She shouted, "Big brother, you're out." Everyone heaved a sigh of relief when they heard that. Their eyes lit up with a blazing light. They took the guy who disappeared for a month as a signal. When he came out, it was time for the war to begin. Suddenly, their surging emotions made the world seem less oppressive. It was not the mood of waiting for the clouds to disperse and see the sun and moon, but the time to destroy the clouds with their own hands. They had been suppressed in this absolute darkness for a month. Now it was finally time to disperse it with their own hands. He stretched his arms and legs after hearing that. Divine power surged all over his body, and he was ready to go all out. Finally, everyone turned their gazes over and looked behind the little girl. There, the figure who had disappeared for a month was coming over with Jing Yuanji. The aura all over her body had become a little strange. It felt as if they were looking at a walking ancient relic. That sacred and ethereal feeling made them unable to stare at her. Yin Nuoxing nodded to everyone. At this time, the origin crystal could no longer be seen on his body. There were no obvious changes outside his body. The red and black mark on his forehead was flowing with light, revealing an endless aura of destruction. This aura that spread inadvertently made everyone feel frightened, as if they had seen the whole world collapsing and dying. Foam! We stepped forward and patted Yin Nuoxing on the shoulder. Looking at his appearance at this moment, his expression was somewhat meaningful. This aura, are you evolving in the direction of the origin god and the others? You can feel it so easily. Yin Nuoxing shrugged, then smiled at Hui and said, "Something happened. If I'm still alive after this, I'll tell you slowly. This month has been torturous for me. Can you not say such generous words before the battle?" Hui's face darkened. Yin Nuoxing chuckled and waved his hand. A teleportation array appeared with his feet as the center. "Let's go." "Hey, little girl, stay. What are you doing?" Yin Nuoxing, who was preparing to teleport, saw Jixun, this little girl, hugging a big sword that was taller than her. She was wearing a long dress and armor that she had changed into at some point. She looked like a little Valkyrie. "I can help. Big brother, don't underestimate me." The little girl waved the big sword that she was hugging and snorted. "Big brother, don't forget what I am." Yin Nuoxing threw a bewildered look at Jihan Xiao. The latter laughed bitterly. "Don't look at me like that. I've been persuading her for half a month." After saying this, Jihan Xiao turned his head and muttered to the air with a distressed expression. Girls are disobedient when they grow up. Children are at odds mostly because the father didn't manage them well. I'll educate her again another day, but it's too late to beat her up now. Everyone did not know whether to laugh or cry. Yin Nuoxing was also speechless. His appearance was a little rushed. Now that he was making a ruckus, the seriousness before the battle had flown away. Forget it. There was no time to do anything else. Chapter 1643. If one were to stand close to the dark barrier, they would feel that the entire world was enveloped by this thing. It encompassed the entire land of Ganyuan. However, in terms of size, it should be much smaller than the dark elemental barrier that sealed off small divine land. It was countless times stronger. The dark blue and purple mixed with black patterns on the barrier constantly changed its appearance like rolling clouds in the wind. The aura of energy coming from it was deep and abnormally deep. The rolling patterns and surging energy were like abyssal cracks that were about to devour people, causing everyone present to feel uncomfortable. Yin Nuashing and the others who were often in contact with non-order forces were slightly used to it, but Jihan Xiao and the others, this was their direct confrontation with it. The last time they fought in the concept layer of rules was at most a warm-up. It was not as simple as the previous time when they assisted the energy tower in the defense coil. This time, they had left small divine land's barrier and directly used their bodies to feel the chaotic aura of non-order. It was daunting. The last time I saw that demonic shadow, I already had a headache. The aura that rushed to my face was enough to make me feel nauseous, but this. We looked at the non-order energy barrier that was only a few thousand feet away, staring at the mixed and twisted patterns, and could not help but shake his head. This is the normal appearance of their power. Perhaps it's only 1/10,000th of its power, or even less. Yin Nuashing tidied her collar and walked up from behind to stand beside Hui. She looked at the huge barrier in front of them. It's the same level of power as the god of origin and the others, but it only has the spirit but not the form. Hui was stunned. What do you mean? It only has the quality but not the quantity. Yin Nuashing breathed a sigh of relief. In other words, even if there's a demonic shadow inside, it's the kind that's extremely weak. Its power is still very strong, but it's only hanging on to its last breath. Well, that's what it means. Do you believe that even with its last breath, it can still press us into the void and beat us up? You've already said so. How can I not believe it? Hui laughed bitterly and straightened his face. However, it's still very quiet so far. We're already in a hurry, but there aren't any waves. We are the attacking party. Yin Nuashing glanced at him. There aren't many of us charging head-on. Most of us are at the back, preparing to enter the conceptual level of the rules for another level of battle. Even though we can pose as an army of 10,000, but in front of the characters from the mythological era that may exist inside, this kind of momentum seems to exist in name only. If you say that we are on the defensive side, it's normal for us to be noisy at the beginning. Wasn't it very lively a month ago? The enemy didn't even show up, but they already turned the entire cloud continent upside down. We could not help but smile bitterly. That was true, but he still felt that something was missing. This was a decisive battle where the entire army would attack. There was only the sound of the wind in their ears, and the only thing they could sense was the turbulence of the non-order energy. Such a small movement was still too quiet. They're making a ruckus as soon as the fight starts. Yin Nuashing breathed a sigh of relief. They could only chat for a while now. When the fight starts later, they might not even be able to find the center of the void. The wind mixed with the non-order energy breath blew past them. Both of them stared at the huge barrier in front of them. Waves of distorted and chaotic energy were surging on the barrier, and the obsidian energy was surging. The other party was also ready, and they could feel that it was not far from the time when they were ready. At this moment, they were just putting the first card on the table to tell them, they're ready to fight. Bring it on. Jihan Xiao and the others who were ready at the rear came to the two of them and looked forward. Jihan Xiao said softly, the troops at the rear are also ready to attack. Once there's a movement in the conceptual level of the rules, we'll immediately enter there to fight. The middle-aged man in the blue robe could not help but frown. Wouldn't it be better to attack the conceptual level of the rules first? Wouldn't it be better for both sides to fight together? Yin Nuashing shook her head. Don't forget that we're at a disadvantage now. Before we have a 100 million guarantee, we shouldn't take the risk. That's their other nest. Even I'm not sure if we can attack the conceptual level of the rules first. Let's just play the backup. Right now, the conceptual level of the rules only has an advantage in terms of rules. It's suppressing our rules. Once the other party feels pressured in a head-on clash, they'll start to mobilize the power of the conceptual level of the rules. It won't be as simple as suppressing the power of the rules. Hui explained, in short, that's also an important battlefield, but it's only suitable for backup. Let's wait for them to make a move first before going there. If we rush in now, we might not even know how we died. We then looked at Yin Nuashing. You really don't need me to stay and help? Let Jing Yuanji stay and help you. Yin Nuashing rejected him again. No, just arrange for equal combat power on both sides. Once there's a change in the conceptual level of the rules, all of you will go there. I have other backup plans here. He pointed at his own head, and Hui instantly said, "Oh." Ming had already gone back. It seemed like they were planning to fight as husband and wife. If that was the case, he did not need to be so nervous. It's about time. Yin Nuoxing looked up at the sun. This action was actually not very meaningful. It was just a random opening. Let us take the lead. Jihan Xiao stepped forward and said. The front line will be left to you alone, right? I don't know what special arrangements you have, but just hearing about it makes me feel pressured. Besides, we have more people in the second battlefield. Removing the barrier should be, We shook his head halfway. Han Xiao. Oh, Han Xiao, you haven't seen this guy's power, but don't worry. You'll know in a few minutes. I'll let you see what it means to be a one-man army. Feng alone is comparable to a million-strong army. This all right. Where's your girl? Jihan Xiao tilted his head and looked at Jing Yuanji. Letting her come here is the limit. It's impossible to bring her here, so I'll let Miss Jing take care of her. Hui grinned. After confirming that everything was fine, he tilted his head and looked at Yin Nuoxing, who was surging with different auras. He could not help but smirk. Feng, are you planning to use that? Yin Nuoxing glanced at him. Didn't you already guess? What the F***CK really? Yin Nuoxing said, 2 armies are confronting each other. If there's nothing else, please don't speak. It'll affect the atmosphere. I was just guessing. I didn't expect you to really do that. Hui smacked his lips. How many years has it been since you used that form? It's been at least 1 trillion years. You didn't even use it when Long Sky attacked Godworld. Being in Godworld, I naturally have enough power to replace it. Besides, I didn't expect this at that time, so I didn't have that much time to prepare. How could I use it? Yin Nuoxing let out a long sigh. Long Sky was already in a desperate situation when he changed his home. Who would give him the time to slowly cast his ultimate move? This time, it was different. This time, he had plenty of time to prepare. However, it's true that if I had the time to use this form when I was dealing with Long Sky the last time, I wouldn't have needed to mobilize the power of the entire realm of the gods to be able to kill him in the realm of the gods. All right, let's not talk about this anymore. Yin Nuoxing looked at Hui one last time, then closed his eyes. The energy that had been surging in his body countless times burst out like a fountain. I'll go first. You guys follow me when the time is right. The moment he said that, Yin Nuoxing's body became transparent. A second later, he suddenly disappeared as if he had melted into the air. When he disappeared, they could vaguely see that more than 10 chains around his body had suddenly collapsed. Jihan Xiao and the rest were stunned. They had no idea what had happened. Hui knew that they were shocked. He raised his head and pointed to the sky. His tone was slightly agitated. Look up at the sky. This is the most brilliant moment that guy has ever had. Brilliant. That's right. It was so brilliant that it could light up the entire void. In the completely dusky sky, a ray of sunlight suddenly sprinkled down from the sky, causing everyone to stare blankly. The chaotic clouds that had been tightly surrounding the entire cloud continent for a month unexpectedly dissipated at this moment, revealing a huge hole. Pure sunlight fell from the big hole, casting a gorgeous curtain of light in the space, projecting the mottled sunlight into the entire world. And in the clear and pure sunlight screen, there was a mottled cross-shaped starlight. Its light itself seemed to be pure white and had a feeling of merging all the colors in the world. However, the shining light had a bit of abnormal darkness. If Tianyang Wang did not shine on it, they probably would not be able to see its shining light. When they looked closer, they saw the essence of the light. It was Yin Nuoxing. However, it looked completely different from before. Pure and brilliant white light overflowed from his body, dyeing his entire body into the purest white. It was almost transparent. The patterns that were engraved with the origin aura and the origin law shone from every corner of his body. As his body swayed slightly, a substantial light arc was drawn out. Behind his shoulder blades, the pitch-black energy seemed to be in between substance and illusion. It condensed into two wide streamers that were 10 feet long. They were like two huge azure wings that stretched out with the surge of energy. Although it took a long time to prepare, this is really, really exciting no matter how many times I see it. We cannot help but sigh. And because I've come into contact with so many things, the law, order, energy form displayed this time has a more powerful feeling. The combination of pure order and chaos. TSK, it's too contradictory. Don't keep staring. It's too late. When he turned around, he saw Jihan Xiao and the rest had lowered their heads and covered their eyes with a pained expression. We cannot help but laugh bitterly. What's going on? How did Lord Feng become like that? Jihan Xiao covered his eyes and couldn't stop his tears from flowing. He had only looked at it for a few seconds, and he felt as though his eyes were being cut into pieces. The pain reached his brain and spread to every part of his body. However, the pain came and went quickly. He only felt a burning sensation from his eyes to his neck. Law, order, energy form. Of course, I personally like to call it the complete liberation mode. The components that make up one's existence are replaced with the power of law and order. With law and order as the skeleton, one's body is made up of pure energy and all kinds of energy. In other words, Lord Feng is a mass of condensed infinite power of law, order, and energy. His every move can cause destruction. Yes, he's also fused with part of the god of destruction's origin law. This is even more ridiculous. You can do this? The middle-aged man could not help but gulp. He suddenly felt that the extent of his death last time was far beyond his imagination. How is that possible? We could not help but exclaim, we're not masochists. He's the only one in our world who can do this. Do you know that using this form on your body is equivalent to burning your life and soul 100 times more serious? Do you know the process of transforming into this form? Speaking of the process, he broke out in cold sweat. Well, let's not talk about that. Let's talk about something healthy. Everyone laughed bitterly. It would be weird if they knew. Anyway, they could roughly tell that it was very scary. Hui forced himself to change the topic and continue to stare at Yunhua planet. The already dangerous planet had completely turned into a mobile source of disaster this time. This aura, this energy, this overflowing power that made Hui feel extremely terrible pressure. God knows what kind of situation this guy would be in after carrying the power of chaos and part of the power of the god of origin and then using this form. Judging from the current situation, having a 30% chance of winning was not an exaggeration. The only drawback was that it would take a long time to prepare. That was why Maple was still holed up in his room after collecting the origin relics. However, it only took him a short while to switch to this form. 2 minutes ago, the guy who was still talking nonsense to him was now floating in the air like a star. Even the non-order energy that permeated the air retreated 3 feet due to the unusually dense pressure. The world was still clear and clean. Inform everyone to look up. If there's nothing else, don't look away unless you don't want your eyes anymore. Let the energy tower recharge. Everyone, get ready for battle. A supreme will of energy burst out explosively. In an instant, it came from the sky and shocked everyone. As if they had received the signal to start the battle, they lowered their heads and made their final preparations. Some held their weapons, some sharpened their knives, some applied poison, some took deep breaths, some changed their clothes slowly, some put down their lunch boxes quickly. Wait a minute, it seemed like something had sneaked in. Buzz! All the energy in the world turned into a substantial cloud column and surged into the sky. Yin Nuoxing's frosty eyes stared at the huge energy barrier in front of her. She gently raised her right hand. The two dark azure wings on her back fluttered with the violent surge of energy. An incalculable amount of energy crazily gathered at a point above her head. The energy that had long exceeded the capacity of space tore the space and void into pieces like crispy pieces. When the wind of energy blew, a large piece of it would be blown away. The sky that had just cleared up was quickly filled with darkness again. But this time, it was a pure darkness. It was the colorlessness of nothingness and void. First, I'll break your outer armor, Yin Nuashing whispered softly. Her eyes that were shining with countless colors reflected a crazily gathering energy vortex. Turn into dust in the void. The energy that had gathered to the point where it could turn both the void and nothingness into history took shape in an instant. The endless energy condensed into a massive mass of highly concentrated energy that was at least 100,000 miles in size. The energy had a pure white, transparent shell, and the core was a mass of extremely violent chaos energy. The moment the two powers of order were formed, they became extremely violent as they unleashed their destructive power without holding back. Every single energy shockwave that was unleashed from its massive size would cause space and time to wail as if they were about to collapse. Good Lord, starting with the star annihilation. Are you planning to destroy us all? We looked at the big man, shining with light above his head. Cold sweat broke out. He quickly waved his hand and said, "Everyone retreat. Convert 1/3 of the energy into defense. Don't just stand there and watch. That guy will even beat up his own people when he goes crazy." After the gigantic star was formed, it tumbled and fell towards the energy barrier below. When the gigantic star was formed, it produced a substantial stream of light that told everyone that it was falling. That feeling was even more exciting than watching a meteorite fall towards one's face. It was as if a sun was falling. Just the pressure that was crazily approaching was enough to take one's life. They could not be bothered to watch the heroic scene of creation as they retreated in fear. Jing Yuanji and the others were calm. They calmly turned the energy towers into defense mode, and then looked up calmly at the violent sun falling with a violent momentum. It crashed into the layer of non-order barrier, and a dazzling light burst out. An energy shockwave so intense that it felt like it could split the heavens and earth apart, robbed everyone of their sight and hearing. Just the shockwave of light alone made everyone unable to even hear the rumbling of the energy shockwave. Everyone still had their eyes open, and they could still see some of the dark blue, purple, and black shards flying out and shattering amidst the world-creating light. It was obvious that the barrier had been destroyed. Maple, who was in such a life-risking state, couldn't even destroy the barrier with his first attack. If he couldn't even destroy the barrier with his first attack, then their vision would return to normal. The energy of creation and destruction was also poured out by extreme means. Originally, if this energy was allowed to freely release its power, the energy storm and energy light might last for more than 10 minutes. However, under someone's control, this 10-minute energy release was compressed into a short half a minute. Its power was indescribable. When their vision cleared a little, Hui immediately used divine energy to clean up the space in front of them. The first thing they saw was that the barrier had been completely annihilated. Not even a scrap was left. The land of Gangyuan that had been hidden for 65 days was finally exposed to everyone's sight. Before they could see what was inside, a huge black shadow blocked their line of sight. The distorted and chaotic form made Huey's eyes twitch. Behind the black shadow, there were more black shadows that looked like squirming ink. They looked really familiar. This is really an indescribably spectacular sight. Ji Hanxiao's eyes were also squinting hard. After the land of Gangyuan opened up, the first thing to bear the brunt was a group of gigantic, unknown creatures that were at least 10,000 feet tall. They had humanoid and beast-like appearances. Their limbs and gigantic bodies were twisted like a jumbled mass of meat. There were even more gigantic, unknown creatures that looked extremely disgusting and squirming. They were all like that layer of barrier. There were no detailed forms. Their entire bodies were in the shape of a ball of energy, a mix of dark blue, purple, and black. They were clearly three-dimensional shadows, but one could tell which one was opening its bloody mouth and which one was waving its limbs as it climbed out from within. The chaos manifestation looks even more disgusting. Huey's eyelids trembled violently. Compared to the Abyss Death Mist manifestation, The ones in front of him were even more disgusting. They were indeed cannon fodder that stood at the peak of non-orderly energy. Just their appearance alone caused 10,000 points of mental damage to all life in the orderly world. Jishun, who was valiant and high-spirited just now, almost vomited. She cried and vomited at the same time. To the little girl, this scene was too impactful. They look like they've just formed, Jihan Xiao said, while suppressing his disgust. Most of them were killed by the aftermath of Maple's attack. It's a basic skill, Hui said casually. He looked towards the depths of the land of Gangyuan, and his expression gradually turned serious. There was an area in the land of Gangyuan where an energy whirlpool was condensed towards the sky. The scale was abnormally huge. The non-orderly energy that was so dense that even he felt disgusted was gathering madly there. The non-orderly energy that originated from the bottom of the cloud continent was also gathering there. Maple, there's a gathering in the depths of Gangyuan. I know. I already felt it that day. On the day of the destruction order, I vaguely felt that there was a point that was rapidly condensing chaotic energy in the land of Gangyuan. Yin Nuoxing nodded faintly. And now, I can see it directly. Looking at the chaos manifestation that did not intend to take the initiative to attack and instead used its body to form a wall and set up a defensive formation, we let out a long sigh. All right, the target is clear, but looking at the formation in front of us, I'm afraid we'll have to sweep through everything. All right, you really don't need help? Look at the formation in front of us. I'll give you 3 seconds. If you say you need help, there's no need for that. You just have to move with me until the concept level of the rules is activated. Don't be so arrogant at this time. You still need our help. Do you want to make a plan or something? Don't be so long-winded. Let's just go straight in. Yin Nuoxing snorted softly and swung her long, pure white hair that was 10 feet long. With the 2 azure wings behind her as the center, a group of magic circles appeared in batches and surged with energy that broke through the seal of the void and the rules. The number of magic circles blotted out the sky and covered the earth. The energy ripples that were constantly spreading allowed the power of order to instantly gain the upper hand. Once again, tens of thousands of magic circles rumbled and concentrated the energy shockwaves that could wipe out the entire cloud continent on the ground in front of them. Everyone's vision was once again drowned out. No matter what method they used, they could not determine whether those chaos manifestations were dead or not. But looking at the situation, well, they should not be able to survive. The bombardment of energy shook the earth, causing Hui to suddenly become alert. The Guardian's shield and sacred sword shone with the light of attack. The great sword pointed forward. Everyone, open up a path from the flanks. Don't block that killing god's sweep. Under such circumstances, charge into the range of his sweep. We'll meet again 10,000 years later. Chapter 1644. This was a world shrouded in darkness. The energy of chaos and order filled every corner of this world. The dense and pure aura of chaos repelled every existence in this world. The aura of chaos and order was everywhere. However, there was a layer of barrier that preserved a huge piece of land. Compared to the three-dimensional space of the entire world, this piece of land that was preserved only took up less than 1/3 of the entire world. That was already an extremely rare thing. In another direction, the aura of chaos was fading slightly. The power of order suddenly rose from a small reaction to an extremely high level. It even pierced through the clouds of chaos that blotted out the sky and earth, forming a huge hole as if it was the eye of storm. However, although the power of order had the upper hand in this place, the non-order energy in the surroundings could not be ignored. This was not like standing on an isolated island in the middle of the sea. Instead, it was like looking at a small pool in a vast continent. This place still belonged to the non-order domain. It was already extremely difficult for the power of order to forcefully open up a domain of order that was not too stable. Looking down from the hole, the scene that appeared inside the hole was not as calm as the eye of the storm. In the huge area, there was a dense battle. Every flare of energy was caused by the collision of multiple powers of order on both sides. The scale was huge. The largest flare of energy covered half the area of the eye of the storm. The frequent flashes of energy were like the explosions of new energy, causing the sky, earth, and space to tremble. Countless powerful energy explosions occurred again and again. On the surface, the power of order was gradually pushing forward, leaving behind a large area that was not completely purified. It was gradually shrinking the defensive line of the wellspring land, constantly destroying the non-order energy. It would not be easily extinguished until one of the two sides was completely wiped out. At the moment, it seemed that the power of order had the upper hand. That was normal, gathering all the high-level powers of order that could be mobilized in this world to charge into one battlefield. It was normal for them to have such results before the generals of the non-order side showed up. However, one should not forget that the other battlefield had not started yet. The enemy had not really shown up either. The ones that appeared here were some of the more exquisite high-level cannon fodders. Well, they were not cannon fodders. The power of every chaos spawn was very powerful. Unlike the abyssal death shroud spawns that were suppressed by sheer numbers, the power of the chaos spawns was very complete. Some of them could even use weak divine authority and divinity. The divinity of chaos, in simple terms, was an attack command that specialized all sorts of powers. They were much more powerful than the abyssal death shroud spawns that had lost their minds. However, it was unfortunate that they had encountered a certain fellow who had not opened up a large scale for trillions of years. He was recklessly unleashing his power here. 90% of the countless traces of broken walls and fences were left behind by him. The two powers of order and non-order were still fighting on the broken land after the warriors from both sides had left. However, the latter was obviously unable to continue the fight. The energy towers that were left behind along the way had become something like a stronghold, spreading the influence of the mini-world creation barrier to this place and leaving the power of order behind. It was just an emergency measure. It would take some time for the non-order power to be eliminated. However, the energy that was rooted in the land was much easier to deal with than the spawns that were moving around. Scorched land. Jihan Xiao suddenly muttered softly. He picked up a piece of debris that was obviously some kind of building on the ground. He could not help but sigh. He turned around and looked at the green cloud land that was connected to the Ganyuan land. He calculated the distance in his heart. There should be a city in the Ganyuan land at this distance. Now it seems it has already turned into ashes when the two powers of order clashed. We pushed the divine power forward and took the time to respond to Ji Hanxiao's words. It might not be appropriate to say it out loud. However, when the Ganyuan land was sealed, we already knew that all the beings of order would. Ji Hanxiao let out a long sigh. He was also mentally prepared. It was just that he still had a little bit of hope deep in his heart. After all, the entire Ganyuan land had at least hundreds of billions of lives. If all the lives were counted, the number would be tens of thousands of times more. They had completely disappeared within a short period of a month. Not only that, they had even become the enemy's power to deal with them. How sad. Just get used to it. Huey's eyes flickered. He turned his head and said calmly and naturally, "We're already used to it." The words that Feng once warned everyone, I'll also give them to all of you. This is a war between order and chaos. There are only two camps at the beginning of this war. There are only two outcomes. It's either they die or we, who represent the world of order, die together. Being purified by the power of order is also a form of relief for them. Even if we can't save them, we should at least let them go in a more dignified manner. Well, that might not be the original words, but that's the general idea. War, this is war. This is a war that can't save anyone. They, who have completely become the claws of chaos, can only be purified by the cannon fire of order. Even if there are people you used to know, even if they're family and friends. However, because they're family and friends, they have to do it themselves. No one is willing to become the claws of chaos and become a monster with the lowest level of consciousness. That's why we said before, all the so-called justice, the so-called redemption, the lofty aspirations, the boiling of blood, these things will not appear in the war between order and chaos. There's only slaughter, destruction, and death. The empty talk about, well, that is not allowed to appear here, is just a joke. As soon as he finished speaking, there was only the rumbling sound of energy. The atmosphere was so gloomy that it was as if they had entered a silent world. He let out a long sigh of relief. He sent out his holy power through the shield and the greatsword, turning the area into a golden pure land. After waiting for someone to leave enough energy towers behind, he lifted his spirits and continued to move forward. Have you ever faced a friend who has transformed into a monster? No one knew who suddenly whispered that sentence. It made the already depressing atmosphere even heavier. Everyone looked at Huey's back that was shining with golden light. Their gazes were complicated. Yes, Huey's footsteps did not stop because of this. He smiled faintly. It's not just me. We've all done similar things. Even if we're lonely and don't know many people, we've also stood on the battlefield and killed our compatriots who belong to the Order camp. Perhaps not knowing anyone would lessen the psychological burden. Feng is like that. In the countless worlds in the void, there are less than 20 people that he's really talked to and seriously got to know. So every time in a head-on battle, he's always the calmest and coldest one. Unlike me, who actually knows a lot of people. Sometimes, when I inadvertently see a guy from tens of thousands of years ago, or someone I once had a cordial conversation with rushing towards us with the aura of chaos, I can't help but sigh, it's this guy. I haven't seen him for so many years. I didn't expect to have to send him on his way when we meet again. How unlucky. There are many similar things. Hui heaved a sigh of relief again and ended the topic lightly. Although he forcefully suppressed his emotions and could not have too many emotions in order to prevent it from affecting the direction of this deadly battlefield, he did not like to talk about such things endlessly. Even the joke with a faint teasing tone earlier was only a symbolic laugh from him. Jihan Xiao and the rest could not laugh at all. With just a few words, they could feel the cruelty of this level of war. It was a tragedy that they had yet to adapt to. The things that they used to deal with and fuss about in the past seemed to have become the trivial matters of humans in front of this level. Looking at the chaos derivatives that filled their line of sight, their gazes were a little dazed. It was as if they could see the faces of some people that they used to know inadvertently appear in front of them. Come back to your senses. Hui used the Guardian's sword to knock on the large shield. Sacred energy turned into an invisible impact and spread out, waking Jihan Xiao and the rest from their dazed state. When they came back to their senses, they saw the former's serious expression, which was the opposite of the half-serious half-smile just now. Don't expose your weak side in the domain of chaos. They'll take advantage of it. Sorry, I was distracted. Jihan Xiao slapped himself hard, took a deep breath, and quickly came back to his senses. Your adjustment speed is not bad. Hui waved the large sword in his hand and drew a few golden energy waves. Let's continue forward. The main force has been taken care of by Feng. Before our battlefield appears, we have to at least take care of the flanks. Furthermore, this speed of advancement shouldn't last very long. Hui calmly looked into the distance. His gaze passed through the energy fireworks shining in the sky and looked behind. The chaos derivatives that we've encountered so far may seem large in number and fill up the entire space, but they're actually just a group of wandering soldiers. The real main force is still behind us. We're about to reach a boundary. Jihan Xiao's gaze trembled slightly. He seemed to understand what he meant. There seems to be a very prosperous city in the Gangyuan ahead. If all the lives inside, everyone's expression changed slightly. If that was the case, it would be a disaster. That place might have already become one of the chaos derivatives' main camps. If they continued to calculate, it would be even more terrifying. There were hundreds of cities like that in the Gangyuan. Furthermore, as mentioned earlier, the number of lives in the Gangyuan was at least in the hundreds of billions. That scale, boom! It was as if a comet was crashing into the ground at a speed of 10 million miles per hour. Everyone turned to look at it. Beams of energy light that were tens of thousands of miles long descended from the sky. One could see a formation that looked like a silver-white moon shrouding this part of the world. Beams of pure white energy light turned into huge blades and fell to the ground. They moved at an irregular speed, leaving deep scars on the ground. Everyone, retract your formation. Feng's about to unleash his ultimate move. Those who don't want to be involved, back off quickly. After Hui finished speaking, the energy light pillars that seemed to be a prelude to his attack suddenly froze in their densely packed positions. Then, the millions of formations simultaneously emitted sounds of energy gathering. In just a moment, they opened up and bombarded the ground. Every energy released by this form of yin nuashing contained a dense aura of destruction. Any small energy explosion could blast a 1,000-feet deep crater on the ground. The white shockwave would wash the ground within a radius of tens of thousands of feet, either destroying or collapsing it. There was an unlucky giant manifestation that was caught in the middle of hundreds of energy shockwaves. Each energy shockwave carried enough destructive power to destroy it 4 or 5 times. With just one flash of energy, the giant manifestation flew up and plunged into one of the descending energy pillars. Not even a speck of dust was left behind. It was just a coincidence that it was so unlucky. After all, we looked up and saw that Feng was not even lifting his hand as he walked forward with millions of formations and unleashed endless attacks. He knew that this was a new round of wiping out. If they were not here, he believed that Feng would have already unleashed the order of the origin of nothingness. With a round of indiscriminate attacks, the Gang Yuan would have been turned into a Gang Yuan. Well, half of it would be gone. The manifestation would be gone along with it. Hui suddenly held the Guardian's sword horizontally in front of him. A thing that was originally 3,000 feet tall, but was now a pile of black mosaic, was pushed forward by the shockwave. It directly stabbed into his long sword, and was then purified into ashes by the divine power. He swung his long sword and shouted at the right time, "Attack freely. Continue to push forward." The people who had stopped to cooperate with Lord Feng naturally did not waste any time. They were all holding back their energy. Now that they heard Huey shout, they all used their accumulated energy and attacks to smash the ground in front of them. Lord Feng drove straight in. They took advantage of the flank and bombarded it indiscriminately. They could not wait to blow the entire ground into the sky. In the area covered by endless energy, the warriors of the Cloud Continent were also trying their best to cooperate with the warriors of the Celestial Realm and launch their own attacks. They were all burning their hair behind them, trying their best to use all their attacks as long-range attacks. They did not dare to move forward. If they took a wrong step forward, they were guaranteed to be drowned in the light and destruction of the endless energy bombardment in the next second. Not even their shadows could be seen anymore. However, their attacks were still very good. After all, they had gathered the most elite forces of the Cloud Continent. They had also been quickly trained by men. They used all their means: talisman arrays, talisman papers, magnetite, long-range punches and kicks. All kinds of strange fighting methods, energy attacks, materialization attacks, or pure physical attacks. This allowed them to explode with power that was not inferior to a corner array formed by energy towers. After all, they were not like the warriors of the Celestial Realm, who were all energy life forms. Even Lady Green, who liked to use her fists to pierce through the void, could use long-range energy attacks. With the help of energy towers, the power was even greater. The people of the Cloud Continent definitely could not use the same method to fight against the Chaos Spawn. However, the limited power they could display was already not bad. We felt that even if they suddenly entered another battlefield, it would not be too big of a problem. As long as they maintained this momentum, they had a good chance of winning. Speaking of the place where the battle had not yet begun, speaking of which, they are really calm. Hui opened up a part of his divine domain, using his own power to disperse the non-order energy that had infected the area in front of him. He looked at the sky and said, "We have already been here for 4 hours, right?" They still do not intend to use the concept layer of laws to pressure us. The middle-aged man's attack paused for a moment. Is it possible that they are bluffing? Or that they are already in a place where we can't find them? No, both of these are impossible. Our team's concept layer of laws is still paying attention even now. Maple is also paying attention. If they want to use the power of the concept layer of laws and the power of the cloud continent to forcefully suppress us outsiders, that kind of movement cannot be concealed. So it can only be... Hui used the back of his hand to wipe off the sweat on his chin and replied, "Perhaps with the damage we have caused so far, it is not enough for them to treat us as a threat. Or perhaps we have not caused enough damage to touch the bottom line in their hearts." No matter which one it is, it sounds a little bad, Hui said indifferently. His eyes flickered as he considered the possibility of all the chaos spawns being thrown out as cannon fodder to stop time. I'm almost tired of reading one-sided wipeouts, Hui muttered softly. By the way, it was almost time to finish teaching the newcomers. Then, next, Maple, there is an abnormal situation ahead. Everyone, temporarily halt your attacks. Radiance shouted, but before she could say anything else, she was stunned by Yun Nuoxing's sudden words. She raised her head and looked ahead. From the ground, there was a gentle slope that sloped upwards. However, probably because the ground in front of her was flat ground formed from scorched earth, as well as the potholes left behind by Maple's energy bombardment, as well as the chaos spawns that filled her vision, she had not noticed this slender and gentle slope before. Now, it looked a little like a short mountain, and its horizontal range was not small. Bang, 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 bang. One after another, energy bombardment fell from thousands of feet in front of them with a momentum that could wipe out the ground. Two-thirds of the mountain was blown away, and half of the slightly sloping ground in front of Hui and the others had been shaved off. After killing all the chaos spawns here, the energy reaction that was wreaking havoc in the world suddenly weakened by a lot. Everyone saw that Yun Nuoxing had dispersed her own attacks and descended from the sky to stand on the mountain. The entire world fell into a temporary state of calm. There were no more energy bombardment, no more attacks or roars from the chaos spawns. The entire world suddenly became quiet, giving everyone the illusion that the battle had ended. However, there was an even more ominous atmosphere ahead, causing everyone to wake up from their illusion. After leaving behind a divine domain for purification, Hui hurriedly rushed to Yun Nuoxing's side. Raising his head to look ahead, he could not help but be slightly surprised. After crossing the mountain, what suddenly appeared was a precipitous slope. The long and narrow mountain range was like a blade that stabbed diagonally into the ground ahead. Although the army had stopped moving very quickly, there were still many traces of battle left on the ground below. Further ahead was a plain that exuded an extremely oppressive force. It was vast and empty. Looking past the pitch-black and empty ground, a city suddenly appeared about 10,000 li away. Densely packed, tall, short, fat, thin, ugly, and distorted chaos spawn stood in front of the city like an orderly army. Infantry, light-armored, heavy-armored, large, fortress-sized, and independent chaos spawns. All of them stood straight and orderly in formation. They were cold and strict. Just the formation alone amplified the aura of the chaos energy by several hundred times. What the hell? I dare to bet my head that the abyssal death mist spawns do not have this level of intelligence. We could not help but gasp at the sight of the chaos spawns that appeared like a regular army. The abyss death mist spawns had strengthened their commanders, which was why they were barely able to show the nature of an army. But in essence, they were still a bunch of hooligans who occupied a mountain. Once the battle was at its most chaotic, no one would be able to control each other. This problem was even more obvious after the commanders were eliminated. But these chaos spawns in front of him. As expected, the more life forms gathered in a place, the easier it is for such a situation to occur. Yun Nuoxing's voice came from the front and drew everyone's attention. A small magic circle gathered in front of his eyes. He seemed to be paying attention to other places. There are at least 100 places with similar situations. I haven't seen all of them. The aura of chaos is even thicker in the depths, and my vision is blocked. I can't see in. It seems that the cannon fodder has been used up. These are the main forces, the trump cards. Hui laughed dryly and muttered. His vision, that was filled with divine power, looked into the depths of the space. In those cities, there were armies of various sizes, and each of them seemed to have an independent energy barrier for defense. The barriers that were left in the cities have become their defense instead. Yin Nuoxing sneered and shook his head. Most of the chaos spawns that we have encountered before are just some ordinary chaos spawns that have nothing special. Perhaps they're just some small beasts or demons that have been distorted into that appearance by the chaos energy. As for those champions that originally belonged to the cloud continent, a group of chaos spawns came from the side with rolling flames. Scattered chaos spawns rolled and were annihilated in the raging flames. The small group of chaos spawns were blown up into a mess. Not a single chaos spawn was left intact. A gigantic chaos spawn suddenly exploded in the middle. A white-haired figure that was burning with flames descended from the sky and landed right in front of them. Phew! This side has also been cleaned up. So what's the situation now? Hui glanced at the newbie and pointed his finger forward. Xing LV quickly turned his head and gasped. The flames around his body froze. What? What is that? There's a reason why they have not expanded the battlefield. Yin Nuoxing patted Hui on the shoulder. His black azure wings and body were flowing with substantial energy. He looked at the neat army and then looked at the huge vortex that was still gathering the chaos energy in the distance. This level is not something that can be done with 1 or 2 indiscriminate attacks. Although I can continue to strengthen my power and then use the origin order to finish it off, now is not the time. If I start to increase my power now, how are we going to fight in the future? So, you want to use the cheapest way to finish the battle here. Hui nodded. He could totally understand what Yin Nuoxing was thinking. The enemy leader had not even shown up yet, and they were already using their trump cards. When they had no more card to play in the end, they would just use a wooden club. But in the current situation, I think it's a little difficult. Yin Nuoxing muttered to himself and slowly took out a longbow made of energy crystals. Its entire body gathered countless colors as if it was made of glass. At the front of the center of the bow, there was a ball that surged with dark energy. It was like a crosshair. There is a way. Because it's not a trump card, it can only be used once. After that, it won't have any effect. We have to maximize the results of the battle as much as possible. He waved his hand and scanned the entire land as he spoke in a deep voice. Hui was speechless. Here it comes. This guy is not human anymore. Listening to his tone, he wanted to use this method to finish off the army of 100 cities. This guy loved to destroy the so-called hope. As long as it was the enemy, it had nothing to do with order or chaos. Chapter 1645. However, Hui did not know what Maple was planning to do. Although he knew Maple's form, he had not seen it many times. He had only seen it twice in his memory, and he could not remember what he did the first time. Therefore, even though he had seen Maple's form, he did not know what Maple was up to. He also did not know what his limit was in this form. He had only vaguely heard Maple mention it before. This had to be updated, because that was the situation back then. The situation now was very different. Therefore, we guessed that Maple's strength might be 1 or 2 levels higher than his strength in the realm of the gods. The combination of the 2 forms might be able to defeat a battalion of primeval gods. He ran far away. Anyway, the commotion later would definitely be huge. He would not be able to escape. He definitely would not be able to escape. Although Maple looked very cold and serious at the moment, acting like men who was not considered to have facial paralysis, but was used to having facial paralysis. The corners of his eyes were slightly raised, the corners of his mouth slightly raised, and his sparkling eyes told Hui that Maple was definitely very excited. It was the kind of excitement that came from seeing endless explosions. There would definitely be a grand spectacle later. However, it seemed that Maple did not intend to attack immediately. He was waiting for the sporadic battles in other places to end. He planned to gather all his forces and push forward. We did not understand Maple's plan at the moment, so he simply stood aside and waited. However, he could see that Maple was accumulating power. He had been holding the longbow in his hand, gathering energy. We did not know what Maple was planning. Perhaps the Chaos Spawn had seen through their plan to push forward. The Chaos Spawn also moved a little. The chaos energy in this space was surging, gathering from all directions towards the city that was facing them first. Some of them blended into the chaos spawns guarding the city, while the others, well, they disappeared without a trace. They came out right in front of them, and then disappeared right in front of them. They still did not know what they were planning to do. The fighting in the area led by Order had completely stopped. The last high-energy reaction exploded 1,000 miles away. Not long after, Xing Lu brought the last group of people here. At this point, everyone had gathered here. As for the chaos spawns before them, well, they had gathered quite a lot, about a third more than before. This was exactly the same as the abyssal death mist. They were just as disgusting, and they were risking their lives to create soldiers in the gaps of time. Moreover, they were creating soldiers right under their noses. Everyone's faces twitched at the sight. Chaos spawns born from a mixture of reality and the power of rules. They're not that far off from the abyssal death mist spawn. However, in terms of chaos divinity, the latter is 10 times or even 100 times stronger. He straightened his robes and slowly withdrew his gaze from the distance. He then turned towards Maple, who was still gathering energy. The situation has changed. Do you want to think of another way? He muttered. Yun Nuashing shook his head and casually drew the bowstring. He had yet to gather energy. It's fine if they are gathered here. It doesn't matter if they are scattered everywhere. You don't have to worry about that. It's fine as long as they actually exist here. Hui scratched his head and shrugged his shoulders in question. Yun Nuashing did not answer. He reached out and stroked the energy bead at the front of the bow that was condensed from the energy of annihilation. He turned to look at the others and suddenly showed a slightly weird smile. However, he did not immediately say anything and quietly turned his gaze back. This was the interior of the Chaos Domain. Although he had opened up a domain of order, he was not sure if the other party could hear him if he said a few words. He was too lazy to find out. So long as he did not say anything, it would be fine. He did not believe that the other party could eavesdrop on his voice in the domain. Everyone has assembled. The battle situation is good so far. There are no casualties. Our combat strength is still sufficient. Lord Maple, please give the order. Jing Yuanji came from behind. Her clear voice reverberated in the place and attracted the attention of the people who first appeared here. When they turned around, they saw that the people who were scattered around at the beginning of the battle and were responsible for covering the flanks were all gathered here. There were so many of them. Each of them was surging with energy as if they were about to tear someone into pieces in the next second. There is no need to change the order. I am just gathering all of you here. Yun Nuashing looked into the distance and said, after I attack, continue to attack according to your original trajectory. However, this time, the marching speed is a lot faster. Drive straight in, whether it is me or you. Mei Mao, Jing Yuanji's eyes flashed as they nodded. Understood. The second order had been given. Prepare to start the battle on the other battlefield. The other side seems to have assembled. Hui whistled as he looked into the distance. He could not help but say, it seems that your movement has scared them. The forces guarding the city are almost half as strong as before. And look, the chaos barrier protecting the city has been opened first. Well then, I will make my move. Yin Nuashing took a deep breath. His hand that was holding the crystal longbow tightened slightly. He slowly took a few steps forward and walked towards the front of the mountain peak. A group of palm-sized magic circles slowly appeared in the space beside him. They circled around him and the space in a disorderly manner. The surging energy began to flow. The energy with the substance of flowing light overflowed from his body and turned into a clear and discernible energy cloud that surrounded the mountain peak. The colorful energy was like a ring that was released in all directions with him as the center. Ding! The sound of the bowstring that was made of crystal was as crisp as a finger tapping on a crystal. The longbow that was made of crystal was slowly lifted up in an arc. The energy that was spreading like a ring was suddenly restrained and stopped spreading. It began to converge from all directions and quickly gathered towards the energy bead at the front of the longbow. The hundreds of small magic circles that surrounded the longbow also collapsed and turned into a stream of energy that flowed into the bead. It was as if a gust of wind was blowing in front of him. The energy that was released from his body that was made of pure energy was taken away by the gust of wind. There were dozens of long energy light ribbons behind him. Yin Nuashing slowly closed his eyes. His mind reflected what he saw just now. The longbow that was pointing at the sky from afar made a sharp sound. A stream of chaotic light suddenly surged out. The weak energy impact turned into a gust of wind and was released. Everyone felt that the long arrow that was not fully charged yet, the arrow that was not even fully formed, broke through the air with a buzzing sound of energy. It disappeared from their sight in the blink of an eye, leaving only the energy ribbons and energy flames that were thousands of feet long. That was a mass of energy that had not fully solidified. It was hurriedly condensed into a half-formed form before it was shot out by Yin Nuashing. Everyone was stunned. Bang! A violent energy explosion suddenly sounded in the distant sky. It ignored the rules and reached everyone's ears without any difference. A dazzling ring of energy suddenly exploded in the air. The mass of chaotic energy turned into raindrops that filled the sky and was sent to various parts of the wellspring by the energy impact. It drifted towards the cities that had become the layers of the chaos spawns, the lands where the chaos spawns gathered, and the places where the chaos spawns were concentrated. Why is this guy so quiet this time? Everyone was curious. In such a short period of time, their impression of him was fixed as an explosive. It should have been an abnormally huge movement that would cause the entire world to explode. This time, it seemed every droplet of rain that fell was surrounded by azure energy ribbons. That was the energy of a formation. Every droplet of rain was accompanied by an extremely dense aura of the formation, as if they were raindrops formed by a formation. They fell from the sky and suddenly froze when they were thousands of miles away from the ground. Light instantly bloomed along with the surging energy, turning into a formation that encompassed the entire city. The huge formation core pointed at the ground below. Every inch of energy pattern surged with a huge energy movement like a waterfall slapping on a boulder. Tens of thousands of raindrops separated over the primal ridge, instantly forming tens of thousands of massive formations that encompassed the vast expanse of the primal ridge. The formations rumbled and gathered energy above the cities and chaos barriers. Through the formations, he looked down at the entire land from the skies. His gaze passed through tens of thousands of formations and looked at the innumerable chaos spawns that raised their heads. Sensing the suddenly chaotic energy of chaos between heaven and earth, with a single thought, the formations emitted a majestic energy in seconds. Streaks of purple and red energy beams that were less than half a meter wide fell like tiny rays of sunlight, passing through the chaos energy barriers without any resistance and landing densely on the land below, cutting the city and the land into irregular pillars. The corner of Huey's eyes twitched. The shuddering energy beams were flashing incessantly. The dense energy beams carried dense energy, but were not obstructed by the chaos barriers. Because they were made of annihilation energy and were also non-order energy, they deceived the barrier's recognition and poured massive amounts of energy into the land and into the entire space. In just 5 seconds, the tiny beam became as bright as an energy crystal filled with infinite destructive energy. It was abnormally dazzling, and its brightness was still increasing as it illuminated the entire world. In just a few seconds, the tiny energy beams exploded with a bang and turned into energy beams that were tens of thousands of feet tall. The light that penetrated the heavens and the earth transmitted destructive energy that could not be released. The energy that was as vast as the sea surged into the ground like the land that had fallen into the sea. The energy from each energy beam converged and collided on the ground, tearing out a ferocious and man-eating abyss on the ground. From the inside, the entire region and the entire city was divided into pieces and swallowed into the abyss. Those manifestations were also torn into pieces by the shockwaves because of the sudden movement. They were sent into the abyss by the upheaval of the earth. Before the battle even started, more than half of these elite cannon fodder had been killed or injured. Boom, boom. Violent energy appeared in the domain of chaos. The aura of chaos skyrocketed to a level that was enough to suppress the domain of order in the blink of an eye. We could feel the other party's astonishment and impatience to salvage the situation. He could not help but grin and smash the guardian's shield on the ground. The domain of holiness suddenly expanded rapidly from a corner, pushing the approaching aura of chaos out of the domain of order. Maple, it's about to go crazy. Let's take this opportunity to kill it. We glanced at the domain of chaos that had become abnormally violent and suddenly shouted excitedly, "Wait until I'm done with this attack." Yin Nuoxing closed her eyes and continued to overlook the entire land that was covered in energy. She shook her head to calm Hui down a little. Looking at the entire land of Gangyuan, she suddenly sent out an energy order. "Let this land burn." Energy that could be seen with the naked eye suddenly burst out from the ground and the abyss. The extremely dazzling light made it seem as if the Earth's crust had cracked open and the Earth's core was exposed on the surface of the Earth's crust. The mottled energy that soared into the sky lit up the sky from the bottom of the Earth. That was the vast energy that was injected into the entire land of Gangyuan through the magic circle. As everyone watched the large area of the land in front of them sink, crack, and then burst out with endless destructive energy, the dazzling energy in front of them was suddenly covered by an even more intense light of destruction that soared into the sky. The monstrous destructive energy erupted from the entire land of Gangyuan. This time, it really overturned the land. Every drop of energy in the area that was illuminated by the light was ignited and turned into an accomplice of destruction that tore everything, including nothingness, into pieces. Such a violent scene. It was as if Gangyuan was being swallowed by a massive sun. As expected, this fellow's every move was huge and incomparably violent. There was only the scene of an explosion. Who said that his movements this time were small? He really blew Gangyuan into the sky. With such a degree of saturation bombardment, let alone the chaos spawn, even Gangyuan would be gradually disintegrated into pieces by the destructive storm. In the end, it would turn into dust and be annihilated in the void. I'll destroy one of your trump cards. This way, we'll stand on the same level again. The entire domain of chaos fell into a state of silence. Even the wildly surging presence of chaos was stunned. Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath and slowly drew out the Nethervoid sword. Magic circles appeared around her, condensing from the size of 1,000,000 miles to the size of 1,000 miles to 100,000 miles. From now on, both of us have a 50-50 chance of winning. Everyone get ready. Charge with me. Everyone's expression changed slightly. Putting on an incomparably solemn expression, they adjusted their state of mind again. Brandishing the weapons in their hands, they looked at each other before turning their eyes to the glowing figure standing at the forefront. With the brilliance of energy retracted, he was no longer unbearable to look at directly. However, everyone still felt an unshakable power. Fiddling with the Nethervoid sword, Yin Nuoxing took another deep breath and suddenly opened her eyes. Light flickered, and her body turned into a ray of light. The domain of order expanded abruptly. The energy moved along with her body, turning into a long arrow and shooting towards the deepest part of the domain of chaos. Everyone yelled in their hearts and quickly followed. The vast energy riot continued to produce energy anomalies in the domain of chaos. The various destructive energy anomalies caused by the violent energy obstructed the detection of both parties. Regardless of whether it was them or them, they had no way of detecting each other in this chaotic energy scene. This was their chance. The long arrow formed by energy tore apart the natural defense condensed in the domain of chaos. A large group of people flew past in midair. Jihan Xiao quickly lowered his head to look at the city that was completely engulfed in flames. His gaze trembled slightly, but he did not say anything. At a time like this, he could not think about anything else. The only thought allowed to exist in his mind was to bury the enemy in the void. Boom! After crossing a layer of mountain range formed by a vast sea of light, the dense, chaotic energy on the ground in front of them turned into a wall that rose from the ground and blocked everyone's path. The chaotic energy swept towards them like a tide and a rain of arrows. We, defend the front. Everyone, move according to my orders. Charge with all your might. A huge amount of spiritual energy spread within the range of the long arrow. Yin Nuoxing shouted at everyone. Hui raised the guardian shield and instantly blocked the front. Among the large group of people, some of their expressions suddenly changed. Jing Yuanji's pretty face also changed slightly. She quickly said to Yin Nuoxing, Lord Feng, please be careful. Everyone did not understand why she suddenly said that. What made them even more puzzled was that about a quarter of the people suddenly left the group, including Jing Yuanji. They all rushed towards the sky and tore apart the nomological defense between heaven and earth. Jing Yuanji used all her divine right and divinity to prop up a chaotic space barrier to protect everyone. They rushed into the conceptual layer of the nomological defense together. Everyone looked at Yin Nuoxing in confusion. Before they could say anything, he suddenly waved his hand in front of him. Arrays of tens of thousands of feet in size spiraled forward. Intense energy instantly condensed. Attack with all your might. Jihan Xiao and the rest did not hesitate. They raised their hands and condensed the maximum amount of energy they could unleash. In an instant, the destructive attack of tens of thousands of heavenly gods of origin was unleashed. Mixed with the energy torrent condensed by Yin Nuoxing, it became a destructive wave. In just one exchange, it drilled a huge hole in the chaotic giant wall. The arrow formed by the order domain crashed into the giant wall fiercely, taking away a part of it and bringing everyone through the wall. After crossing the giant wall, before everyone could relax, a huge and distorted chaotic body appeared in front of them. Jihan Xiao was about to condense his energy to attack when a voice suddenly rang in his mind. Team 2, head to the conceptual layer of the nomological defense. Listen to Jing Yuanji's orders and set up the order domain. Stabilize the position. Jihan Xiao instantly realized that almost a quarter of the people's expressions changed at the same time. Then, they rushed into the sky. He understood why that team suddenly left the group. So this was the arrangement. I wish you all the best. Jihan Xiao shouted at Yin Nuoxing. Under the surprised and confused gazes of the remaining half of the people, he also left the group and headed towards the conceptual layer of the nomological defense. Holy shock. Hui had just figured out what he had done when he immediately heard another order. When he came back to his senses, he quickly glanced below. The chaotic body that was formed in an emergency was being suppressed by the remnant energy of the destructive energy phenomenon. The chaotic energy had also hurriedly adjusted to deal with the suppression of the order domain. In less than 2 minutes, the power of the chaos domain would be restored to its maximum level. The chaotic body would block their way again. Withdraw all your senses back into your bodies. Good children, don't look at things you shouldn't look at. Hui roared at everyone. He threw the guardian's shield forward with his left hand and held the guardian's sword with both hands. His entire body glowed with golden light. Visible holy power surged out from the void along with the golden light. The heavenly god of Origin's energy was unleashed to the limit at this moment. It turned into a storm that condensed on the sword in both hands. In less than a second, the energy was completely gathered. Hui used all the energy he could gather in the shortest amount of time and slashed the guardian's shield that was charging at him. Clang! It was as if the sun had collided with the wall of the stars. Of course, there was no sound like this. The light that was comparable to the explosion caused by the collision of the sun and the galaxy suddenly exploded in front of everyone. The light was so bright that it could make the world fade. Everyone who caught a glimpse of the light felt a sharp pain in their eyes. They could not help but cry out. There was something wrong with this guy. This was not a shock. This was an energy nova, the level of energy that could directly cleanse an area. The golden ring of energy exploded, spreading across the entire cloud continent in an instant, spreading the power of the divine and the power of order to every region affected by the energy. The unstoppable divine power even wiped out the thick black clouds in the sky, and the chaos spawns below all fell to the ground as if they had lost all strength. Those that were less than 10,000 feet in size could not even maintain their original forms, exploding into a cloud of smoke and vanishing into nothingness. The entire chaos domain was about to recover, but it was smashed to the ground again. Even the aura that all living beings hated had weakened by more than half. Team 3 now. Everyone, enter the concept layer. Before the faint effect of the energy nova level shock on everyone could fade, the remaining half of them had a voice in their minds. Everyone's expression froze. After a moment, they put on a determined and strong expression. But now that they were temporarily blind, they could not gather. Each of them used their own means to tear the barrier of the concept layer and plunged into it. Behind the tear, there was a burst of vast energy impact. Although it was only for a moment, we could still see it clearly. The destination is right in front. Hui, when you get there, go to the concept layer. They need your power there. Without you, they can't suppress it. Got it. Hui hurriedly responded. Only then did he remember to look up ahead. The huge vortex of chaotic energy was right in front of him. At this moment, all the chaotic energy had entered a state of semi-paralysis. In fact, he did not need to accompany them on this last part of the journey. It was just that he was not at ease. Maple probably knew that he was not at ease, so he asked him to watch him enter the core of the chaotic domain before leaving. That would be another distorted scene that separated the real world. The distorted domain was the core of the enemy. What would happen in there and what they would face, except for Yin Nuashing, probably no one knew. Bang. The arrow formed by order energy suddenly collided with the solid space in front of them and exploded into energy particles. Yin Nuashing and Huey's figures instantly froze. They had arrived at their destination. Although they could not see anything in front of them, it was just a blank space, as if nothing existed. Hui swallowed his saliva and looked at Yin Nuashing. He said calmly, "Maple, then I'll send you here. You're always so adventurous. Come back alive." Yin Nuashing sneered. She patted Huey's shoulder and said, "You're the one. Watch the concept layer carefully. If you can't suppress it in 2 hours, I'll despise you." TSK. Hui rolled his eyes fiercely. He turned around and rushed into the concept layer. Watching as Hui disappeared before his eyes, Yin Nuashing also took in a deep breath and slowly walked forward. This time, the space that shattered the domain of order didn't erupt with any power to stop them, allowing them to enter as they wished, as though it was welcoming their arrival. Chapter 1646. It was as if he was walking in a quagmire. His body was being resisted by the power of chaos, and his footsteps were restricted. Light no longer existed, and there was only darkness in front of him. It was like the darkness and nothingness before the beginning of the world, the realm of chaos. Yin Nuashing did not know what was inside. He could not guess what it was, and had never seen it before. This should be the thickest power of chaos that he had ever faced in his life. It was comparable to the god of origin, and it was a life that had existed since the beginning of the Great Origin Realm, just like them. By the way, this was what she had told him after their last hurried meeting, even though the process was a little rough. A faint light appeared in front of him, and Yin Nuashing turned his attention. This faint light was still unable to capture his figure, and he was immersed in the darkness that rejected light, so he could not make a sound of surprise. Just a thought flashed through his mind, and he began to walk in that direction. The thought of moving forward appeared in his mind, and the vision in front of him began to change. The faint light was approaching him bit by bit, and it began to expand. The surrounding scenery gradually became clearer. He could see that he was walking out a long passage, and there was only a chaotic scene outside the passage. Nothing existed. The moment his vision left the passage, a flickering white light suddenly occupied his entire vision and expanded violently. When the white light dissipated, Yinuashing put down his hand that was covering the light and looked ahead. Everything had taken shape. The light drifting into chaos. This is the real realm of chaos. Yinuashing murmured in his heart. The thoughts of moving, changing, observing, and so on that were just thoughts. Commanding that thought to come here was just a process of entering the domain of chaos. At this moment, he had truly stepped through the process of entering the domain of chaos and arrived in the true domain of chaos. It was a dark space that lacked light. It was a very large space, and the surrounding ground and walls were made of some kind of metal. The walls were made of an unknown material, and there were lines of blue and green patterns on the walls. These patterns also showed no signs of modification, as if the ground formed by the metal was cut into thousands of irregular regions. The surging light was the only light in this dark space, and it released a light that made him feel uncomfortable. Even though it was just a ray of light, it carried the aura of the chaotic energy. The entire space was like this, and it made him feel very uncomfortable. A realm of chaos that distorts reality and directly shapes it. The king's palace. No, even if the realm of chaos was formed with the king's palace as the center, there was no trace of the king's palace here. This was a space that was forcefully projected into the real world by the chaotic energy through distorting all the laws and order of the real world. The king's palace had probably been distorted into this scene by the chaotic energy. It was a strange space, a real space formed by thoughts, chaos, and energy. There were many huge cylinders around the space that did not seem to be for decoration. They were placed around the space like pillars, but they were not connected to the ceiling of unknown height. The deeper into the space, the bigger the structure of the cylinders. The blue and green patterns on the cylinders gradually deepened in color. There's a bad aura at the top. The little angel whispered in his soul, "Perhaps the enemy is up there." Yin Nuashing nodded. He could also feel that the aura of primal chaos was slowly coming down from above this space that was filled with a strange aura, causing this already strange space to look even more oppressive. "Welcome, heir of the origin." His eyes that were sizing up a little turned cold the moment he heard the voice. He quickly put away all irrelevant emotions and slowly looked up. In the middle of the huge space, a figure had appeared out of nowhere. The figure was half shrouded in the aura of chaos. He could only see the size of the figure, but he could not see its specific appearance. It was a shadow-like thing. "Although it's a little late, we finally meet here." The voice of the chaos shadow was filled with noise that could not be recognized by the senses and ears. It was like the echoing noise that was often heard in the void, the sound of countless things being destroyed and left behind by the laws. "Come, let's have a good talk." A low rumble suddenly came from beneath his feet. The ground trembled. Yin Nuashing glanced at the ground beneath his feet from the corner of his eyes. A square pillar that was cut by blue patterns was buried underground. It was lifting him up towards the depths of this space where he could not see the top. What a good match. Whether it's for them or for us, it's no wonder that it would think that you are a rather interesting character. Could it be that you have something to do with the origin? Or are you like us? The figure floating in the middle of the air spread its arms and slowly landed on the huge pillar that kept rising. In the depths of the space, there were even more huge pillars on the walls. Those so-called walls were actually pillars of various shapes and sizes. The deeper one went, the fewer pillars were of the same height. The walls were receding bit by bit to both sides, and the space became wider. Withdrawing his gaze, it still could not see anything. Yin Nuashing looked at the person before him and said softly, You people, what are you? People call us chaos, equating us with chaos, just like how people mistake them for order. However, it's just a matter of concept. It slowly descended, and the aura of chaos swirled around its body like a spiral, like a dark flame that kept flapping. And just like how they have never denied it, you can also think that we are chaos. Yin Nuashing narrowed his eyes. Nonsense, it doesn't seem like it. Its symbolic meaning is the same as the heavenly god of origin, and its position is described by the void as some kind of agent, such a kind of existence. However, it is indeed the same as the heavenly god of origin, a collective of chaos with them as the center. Just like that demonic shadow, there are actually many things like in the void. Your existence has attracted the attention of the void and our attention. There is a hint of interest in its voice. Yin Nuashing could feel a sense of disgust lingering on his body. Its attention fell on him, and it was observing him. So, as a temporary representative, I ask you this question on behalf of us. Are you willing to give up your identity as order, transform into chaos, and act out this drama with us? Yin Nuashing furrowed his brows. Why do I have to make such a choice? Is there a reason and a need? You just have to answer yes or no. Yin Nuashing pursed his lips, crossed his arms, and said faintly, Please allow me to refuse. A black light suddenly flashed in front of his eyes, blocking his vision for a moment. Yin Nuashing was slightly startled, and the figure in front of him had disappeared. When he was about to use his senses to capture its existence, he suddenly felt its presence 1 meter behind him. With its back facing him, it seemed to be laughing faintly, and its voice was echoing with a complicated sound. As I expected, this is very normal, and also very normal. However, order or chaos is just a kind of standpoint to you. Using it as a guide, the result will eventually lead to the same place. This void will also exist, but in a different form. Why would you refuse? I'm very curious, in the era where they have already passed away, struggling and hanging on in the cracks, is it for the satisfaction of deceiving themselves? Or do you think that the idea of being born for order and chaos is the opposite? Would you also have the same thought? Yin Nuashing looked ahead and said faintly, It has nothing to do with that. Standpoint and whatnot, that's all. As for why, he turned his head and glanced at its back. It's just that you guys are late. What a simple answer. A dull sound, like the sound of a ship that had reached the shore and was forcefully stabilizing itself on both sides of the dock. As the ground beneath his feet suddenly trembled, Yin Nuashing felt that his ascension had stopped. Right above him was still a blurry white light, and he could not see anything. The surrounding walls had retreated to a place that was at least 1,000 miles away. The place where the distorted laws were born from a dream, the meaning, forget it, there's no point in thinking about it now. As he thought about it, he slowly pulled out the Nether Void sword. Since the hostility had already appeared, there was no point in saying more. If that's the case, it turned around and glanced at Yin Nuo planet. Suddenly, it seemed to laugh coldly. Its body slowly floated backward. The aura of primal chaos suddenly surged. In the name of primal chaos, we will treat you as our enemy and eliminate you. Looking back, a cold light with destructive power reflected everything in this space. The Nether Void sword swept across the platform with a huge wave of energy. Yin Nuashing's eyes shone with a solid light, and his body instantly melted into the void. No one could see his movements clearly. It seemed like he was just gently pointing at the space, and the tsunami-like wave of destruction exploded in the next moment. The presence of chaos around his body swept across the space behind him like a whip, but he suddenly lowered his head in an instant. His palms suddenly stretched out in front of him, and the destructive power of chaos appeared. The dark clouds suddenly surged in front of it. The moment it came into contact with the clouds, they turned into colorful energy of order and wrapped around its left hand, causing it to fiercely turn around. The first thing it did was launch an attack behind it. Over there, Yin Nuoxing's figure appeared from under its whip. His body, surrounded by two types of order energy, shot out in a dazzling burst of energy. His two azure wings trembled, and hundreds of spell formations overlapped on them. He fell like a meteor, and the nether void sword in his hand fell with destructive power. Bang! The greatsword slammed into the platform, shattering countless fragments of laws and space, scattering them in all directions. Smoke and dust filled the air, and his figure suddenly appeared outside the smoke like the black cloud. Just as he raised his hand to command the chaos energy, the light flowing around his body suddenly paused, and a destructive power covered in chaos energy suddenly surged out of the smoke and dust, turning into a thunderous pillar of energy that shot towards his face. The whip around his body appeared next to the pillar of energy, and the latter suddenly froze. With a strange sound of energy vibrating, it suddenly disappeared into nothingness. The energy is ineffective, or is it some kind of energy command attack? The smoke and dust suddenly scattered, and Yin Nuoxing quickly walked out with a nether void sword in hand. He frowned as he looked at the chaos demon and muttered to himself. His two energy attacks were useless, and he couldn't sense any destructive energy. It was as if his attacks had been simply canceled out. How surprising. It looked at Yin Nuoxing, who was walking out with a nether void sword, and spoke with a voice that was mixed with noise. Are you really blessed by the origin, and not one of us? The power of chaos in your body is more powerful than theirs. You even fooled me for a moment. I was born from the void of order, at least I can be sure of that. But if you want to go back to the past. Yin Nuoxing held the nether void sword in his right hand, his eyes cold. Sorry, if I have to go back to the past, I don't know what I was at that time, so I don't intend to pay attention to it for now. Is that so? It laughed carelessly. An intense sense of danger suddenly appeared in Yin Nuoxing's mind, and his eyes widened. He quickly raised the nether void sword, and the energy of order surged wildly. In an instant, the chaos demon's face suddenly appeared in front of him, occupying his entire vision. He didn't feel anything during the entire process. It was as if time paused for a moment, and the chaos demon used that moment to appear here. You can use the power of order that you're so proud of to kill me. The chaos demon reached out his hand and placed it on the nether void sword. The power of order that was about to explode suddenly went berserk, and the power of the origin surged out of his body uncontrollably, gathering madly on the nether void sword in front of him. Bang! The collision between the two order energies ended as soon as it began. A destructive force emerged and then was annihilated. An unreasonable force suddenly descended upon Yin Nuoxing. Yin Nuoxing's vision blurred for a moment before he was sent flying by the huge force. In just an instant, he crashed into a wall that was thousands of miles away. TSK, that wasn't a good fight at all. Yin Nuoxing pursed his lips in annoyance and used his upper body to dig himself out of the wall. He was literally slapped onto the wall. From the moment he attacked until now. Well, he didn't understand at all. He didn't know if it was because it was his first time fighting a battle of this level, or because he was in the domain of chaos, or because of the power of order. Either way, he was still confused after 10 rounds. Slowly rising from the dust, Yin Nuoxing waved his hand, and the nether void sword floated around his body and circled around him. He then took a deep breath, and all the energy he could control in his body began to boil steadily. It's just a shadow. If you're here in your true form, I'll start flipping the cards. But now isn't the time. That's right. That chaos demon was just a shadow, and probably not in its true form like the one in the graveyard of gods and demons. However, since it appeared here, and the domain of chaos was here, its true form might be in the depths of this domain, but it was fiddling with something there, and not in its true form. You're quite adaptable. You can even wield their power like it's your own arm, but it's a pity that this isn't your power. That mysterious energy whips came from thousands of miles away, slamming heavily into the wall and rapidly closing in on him, attacking him from all directions and trapping him in the middle. That feeling again, the energy that was surging suddenly stagnated, as if it was affected by some mysterious energy, and he couldn't control the energy in his body well. It even interfered with his pure energy form, and there was an unusual feeling as if his body was here, but his soul was out of control, a feeling of paralysis. It probably did something, and thought that he was greatly restricted. Those few heavy attacks weren't that fast, and he could easily dodge them. But the problem was after that, if he was chased around and attacked for no reason, he would be annoyed to death. Whether it was the energy attacks or the physical attacks, they were just right to make him feel a little pain. Overall, it was very disgusting, and he didn't know if this was one of the tactics it was using to stall. Looking at the huge whips that were coming at him from all directions, Yin Nuoxing let out a long sigh and suppressed the other origin energies that were surging in his body, leaving only one or two energies. And then, boom, the dazzling red and black energy burst out from the huge wall with a destructive force. The dazzling light illuminated the dark space as if the sun had descended. It raised its head and looked at the red and black energy ball. Suddenly, it turned around. A barrier made of chaos energy appeared as it pushed its palm forward. The purplish-black cold light that cut through the void with endless destructive power landed heavily on the barrier. The power that was several times stronger than before shook the hand that was holding the shield, and the scene that appeared behind the nether void sword stunned him. Dozens of overlapping magic circles were shining with the light of order. The power of order was so condensed that it even felt a little apprehensive. Energy! Shut up! Just as he was about to do something, Yin Nuoxing's figure appeared from behind the magic circles. She let go of the nether void sword, and the power of dozens of magic circles gathered in her right hand, and punched out with a force that was several hundred times stronger than before, and a destructive power burst out at the same time. Hundreds of small magic circles roared with a uniform destructive power, and a vast red and black energy exploded on the spot. He was sent flying, and the chaos energy in his body rippled as a result. No matter how fast the attack was, part of the energy was still interfered with. Otherwise, the attack would not have just knocked him back. Don't you like to interfere with my energy? Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath, and the overlapping magic circles behind her scattered and arranged themselves in a net shape in the space behind her. The size of the net expanded from the size of a palm to tens of thousands of feet in just a few breaths, and the other energies that were suppressed in her body surged wildly again. An invisible, strange feeling came from this space again, and Yin Nuoxing's expression changed slightly. This time, she clearly felt the essence of the strange feeling that was suppressing her energy. It was a power that limited the opponent's power of order. In other words, it was in order to attack. The number of times she used it was not particularly high, and it was only effective when the opponent's power of order and order was a certain distance away from her. Obviously, its command attack was very effective against her. A few simple commands had taken out half of her energy and limited 90% of her energy attack. However, Yin Nuoxing was mentally prepared for this. Taking advantage of the moment when the opponent habitually used its command attack to suppress her energy and she was distracted, Yin Nuoxing roared, and the energy in his body boiled. He summoned all the magic circles that were hidden in the void, and before the opponent could suppress her energy in time, he immediately used a huge amount of energy. It was an energy attack that only worked for a split second, and because it only worked for a split second, she used the move that she was most familiar with and could use as a focus attack. In just a split second, 1/3 of the magic circles that covered the entire space lost its connection, and the number was still increasing rapidly, and it was also desperately interfering with her energy. Creation of the void, chaos, falling stars. Less than two-thirds of the magic circles that could still move suddenly burst out with all their energy, and endless origin energy mixed with the power of order gush towards the figure that was still floating in the air. The destructive energy that came from dozens of directions blasted towards it, and it was in a difficult situation. The light of chaos on its body surged rapidly, and before it could form a barrier of chaos, it was pressed into the bathhouse of the void by thousands of energy beams. Chapter 1647. Yin Nuoxing's hands and feet were tied due to the difference in the realm of rules and order. It was mainly because the way the Chaos Spectre used its power made him feel disgusted and uncomfortable. It had been a long time since he had encountered such a feeling. When he was fighting with the others, even though his order and rules were weaker than his opponents, he had never seen them use such a method to disgust him. Perhaps, compared to a normal attack, a command attack that was not destructive and offensive was more like a defensive attack. That was because it required a lot of energy to restrain the enemy. Every trace of the enemy's energy contained its will and consciousness. Although it was only a part of its will, if it really wanted to use a command attack to restrain the enemy, it was equivalent to suppressing the enemy's will and consciousness. Speaking of which, it was a little too much for Yuanshi realm to defend against a peak origin. Defend? Yin Nuoxing was a little stunned. He looked at the place in front of him that was surrounded by a red and black ball of destructive energy. He could not help but frown. Could it be that the Chaos Spectre intended to defend from the beginning and did not intend to have a real fight with him? That was why it kept using such a disgusting method. Damn it, he was fooled. It was obviously stalling for time, but he almost wanted to take it seriously. Well, if he did not take it seriously, he would not know how to get rid of this rock that was blocking his way. Then let's have a serious fight. Let's see if the Chaos Spectre could restrain him faster or if he could use his energy attack faster. The concept layer of rules. To a self-constructed, independent, and closed world in space, the concept layer of rules and the heart of the world were equivalent to the brain and heart of the human body. Once there was a problem with these two things, the entire space would show obvious abnormalities. And if it collapsed, well, then it could be declared dead and carried away in a coffin. Therefore, no one would bother with those two things, even if they had nothing better to do. If something were to happen, the entire dimension would collapse, unless something really happened. Just like what was happening right now. The originally silent dimension, the originally dark and void space, was now trembling because of the violent energy flashes. The energies of order and chaos were colliding without any restrictions or hindrances, unleashing a power that was far beyond 100%. The annihilation of the energies had illuminated the entire dimension into a pale white, almost turning the polar night into polar day. To engage in such an unbridled battle in the concept layer of laws, if it weren't for the layer of order barrier and the energy network that spread throughout the concept layer of laws to maintain the stability of this place, the space in the real world would have long been torn apart by the shock waves. We held up the sacred realm of order, stabilizing the concept layer of rules and suppressing the chaos energy that was spreading towards them. Not far ahead of him, a planet-sized chaos spawn was in a fierce battle with the warriors of order. Bright energy flashes of light shone in the pure darkness of the battlefield. A large number of chaos spawns have appeared in the deep space. The defense on the side is slightly damaged. Quickly send people to defend and continue to expand the range of the realm of order. The power of order has been severely suppressed. If you want the power of order to spread, you have to get rid of that big guy blocking the way first. Every time we just set up the rules of order, it would shatter them into biscuits with one punch. Its influence is too great. Everyone finds the time to focus fire on that big guy blocking the way. Right now, the realm of order is less than 60% complete. If this drags on, before the realm of order is fully formed, we will be beaten up by the chaos energy that came to support us first. Sensing the collapse of the concept layer of rules, the gathering of chaos energy in the distance. Lord Hui, the destructive force of the rules of chaos has arrived. Everyone defend. Assist Lord Hui in defending. Looking past the big guy blocking the way, Hui saw that in the dark space behind him, there were huge pieces of completely indecipherable patterns that looked like patterns woven by some language. Chaos language. Maple's voice suddenly rang out in Huey's mind, startling him. This was not Maple's voice in his mind, but a weak resonance caused by some kind of communication between the two divine roles. In other words, this was from Maple's perspective of an observer, the feeling of looking at this thing with his knowledge, and then through the resonance between the two divine roles, the information was sent to him. This was the result of the adjustment that the two of them had made not long ago. He did not expect that it would come in handy now. At this moment, that guy did not have the time to chat with him. Yep, he even thoughtfully sent him a bunch of information. At first glance, these 4 words were easy to understand, but what they represented, what these 4 words represented gave him a headache. To put it simply, it was first-generation divine language, chaotic version, as expected of an enemy from the same era as the origin heavenly god. This was simply something that could take his life. Hui suppressed the thoughts in his mind in an instant. He raised the guardian shield in front of him and shook it forcefully. Holy barrier. The chaos energy condensed by the huge chaos language suddenly burst out, turning into a huge dark energy flow that was as large as the galaxy, crossing the distance of the concept layer of the rules and instantly blasting on his holy barrier. In just a blink of an eye, he saw that the golden lightning on the barrier had all dimmed, leaving only a layer of barrier in front of him. In an instant, it was on the verge of collapse, and a large number of cracks broke open. This thing is really strong. Hui gritted his teeth against the holy barrier. Even his hand that was holding the shield could feel the pressure on the barrier. He took the time to grab the guardian sword and thrust it into the ground beside his feet. The sacred power of order erupted from his body like a storm, spreading throughout the entire realm of order. Order resonance. The holy barrier that almost collapsed upon contact was suddenly supported by an energy from the entire realm of order. Using the nature of the two opposing powers of order, it neutralized the huge dark energy flow. However, it would also aggravate the energy annihilation at the boundary of the confrontation. From this point of view, it might kill the guy who was holding the shield at the front. But at this moment, he was the one who was standing at the front, so the effect in this aspect was negligible. Even if this level of energy annihilation was magnified 1,000,000 times, it would not be able to kill him. But he could hold on for a while as long as possible. Either he could hold on until the chaos energy was extinguished first, or the thing that was emitting the energy was taken out by his own people. Yep, even if he was the strongest shield in the world of order, the current order void, it was impossible to expect him to be unscathed. Just think about how Maple had used God's language and the first God's language to deal with those gods. Apart from those gods who were above average, just how many of them were still unscathed? Boom! The sound of destruction, accompanied by a violent impact, exploded in front of his eyes at the same time. We felt that both his eyes and ears were hit by a fatal attack at the same time. He quickly took a few steps back to neutralize the impact that was coming at him. Seeing that his holy barrier was holding its ground, Joshua decisively chose to detonate the chaos energy all at once. Just a little bit more, and his holy barrier would have been destroyed. Look, now, there was only a layer of energy barrier that was not even as thick as a biscuit in front of him. Furthermore, he had used order resonance this time. The energy in the realm of order had been depleted by at least 1/5. Maple, this mission is a little too difficult. I could still hold on for 2 hours. But how can I suppress this place in 2 hours? We could not help but smile bitterly. He could not possibly rush out with the guardian sword and the guardian shield, could he? He was just a guy who could take a beating. Looking ahead, there was a dense swarm of chaos spawns, walking towards them like a walking army of nightmares. There was also the big guy at the front who was as tough as him and who was good at fighting. However, the biggest threat was still the attack from the Chaos character. That thing almost destroyed his divine barrier. Before it came out, they had been fighting for half an hour, but they had not suffered any damage. I should be able to destroy that thing, but the current situation seems to be that thing is hiding behind us. It's still accumulating energy. Looking at how it's glowing, it will be able to kill us in less than 10 minutes. It's hiding behind the entire nightmare army, and right in front of it, there's a door god that he would have to spend some time to deal with alone. To get past such heavy firepower and get rid of that Chaos character. Does it really think that I'm Maple, the guy who's unparalleled in other people's territories? He was just a shield. And if he left, what would happen to this realm of order? Energy tower array rearranged. The recovery of order energy is slow. Gather all the energy of the energy towers. From now on, the energy towers will not launch any energy attacks. Turn them into energy gathering mode. Everyone was stunned for a moment. They turned to Hui and saw him holding a shield and a sword in one hand. Then they looked at him as if he had made a decision. They were silent for a moment. Yes, God. Energy towers into energy gathering mode. Remove all restrictions on the energy towers. Prepare to overload. Change to crystals. Take out the biggest trump card. Throw it all in. If it's broken, rebuild it. You guys deal with the energy towers first. I'll go out and kill a wave to buy you some time. Execute the law. Let's go out for a spin. Burn, kill, loot, set on fire. Kill. The soldiers of the God realm were fearless. As long as Lord Hui was still standing here, thinking and fighting, they could continue to exert their strength to the limit until they used up every last strand of energy they had. Holy barrier, solid defense. Hui used all his strength to smash the shield in front of him. After thinking about it, he simply threw the shield on the ground. He took out a long cloak from his storage device and put it on. Holding the sword with both hands, he tilted his head and smiled at Jing Yuanji. Look at me. Don't I look like Maple? Jing Yuanji was stunned. Lord Hui, Lord Maple's essence and appearance are different from yours. No matter how I look at you, you don't look like him. In essence, in aura, you don't look like him. T.H., I'm not really that lunatic. Hui grinned. He was just a shield anyway. Even if a shield could be used as a weapon, it would not become a spear. He raised the sword in his right hand in front of his eyes. Anyway, I'm just learning. At times like this, I need Maple to be here. If Maple isn't here, then I'll just let someone else become Maple. Learn? Mei Mao's eyes flashed when she heard that. Just as she was about to say something, Lord Hui continued, I'll leave this place to you. I'll go out for a walk. Right? This is a rare opportunity. You guys should prepare that thing in the energy tower. Treat it as a test of your power. Fighting these things stronger than the abyssal death mist spawn should give you some good experience. Gather the energy in the energy tower and aim it at that gray symbol in 10 minutes. That's all. We'll take care of the rest. I'll leave it to you. Jing Yuanji called out softly. Lord Hui had already rushed out. In less than 2 seconds, a vast holy energy storm appeared in the space in front of them, dispersing the darkness of the concept layer of rules. The big guy blocking the way also turned away from his action of smashing the order domain. Seeing that Lord Hui was trying his best to divert the attention of the big guy and the chaos spawn, Jing Yuanji sighed softly. Lord Hui and Lord Maple are a little similar sometimes. Both like to mess around. It's just that the two of them are not together. Otherwise, the concept layer of rules this time, well, Lord Maple would have probably already broken through it. In the dim space where dark blue and green light alternately illuminated, 2 figures wrapped in dark energy crisscrossed in the space, leaving a series of violent, destructive energy movements. One of the black figures was even surrounded by colorful energy. The 2 energies displayed from his body were constantly mixing, stimulating, and bursting out energy that was on the verge of going out of control. However, he maintained this edge of going out of control without suddenly trembling, like a sun that was about to be destroyed but still steadily radiating sunlight. Clang! The purple-black greatsword wrapped in colorful energy and a huge five-fingered claw fiercely clashed. A series of metal clanging sounds rang out, and two colored energy sparks flew out. The two formless energies, bringing with them an immense sense of oppression, violently collided in the air. The space around the two of them was completely distorted into the appearance of a huge vortex. The energies of order and chaos violently clashed and annihilated each other. Waves of energy that could split the galaxy in half exploded one after another. Boom! Boom! The destructive energy movements bombarded the two of them, causing the two figures that were crisscrossing rapidly to freeze at the same time. They burst out with a huge force and sent each other flying. After that, they turned into black figures and charged at each other. In the blink of an eye, there is only the sound of countless destructive energies exploding in this dim space like stormy waves. Many of the pillars near the wall had already been blown apart and fell into the abyss below. Come! Yin Nuoxing waved his hand toward the void. Groups of energy formations suddenly appeared and surrounded him. After a short delay, tens of thousands of formations suddenly burst out with destructive energy impact, pouring down like a rain of energy. His figure crisscrossed in the place where the energy rain poured down like a ghost. He pointed at the space in front of him a few times, and a piece of dark, unknown pattern suddenly appeared. All the energy within 100 feet around him was withdrawn completely, and he made use of the gaps in the dense, destructive energy to dodge. This can't go on. He can't hurt you, but you can't hurt him either. If you continue to consume energy, you will exhaust your energy first. I know, but, of course, Yin Nuoxing understood the words of the little angel, but there was an endless loop in his mind. If he used all his strength to fight this shadow now, how is he going to deal with the real body later? If he used up all his trump cards now, how is he going to deal with the rest? This wasn't the realm of the gods. Boom! The violent energy of chaos exploded in front of him. The energy of order and chaos interfered with nearly half of the energy in his body, causing his body to stiffen for a moment. Taking advantage of this time, the chaos shadow suddenly appeared in front of him. Its huge black claw pressed against his face and slammed him into the wall behind him. From the beginning until now, there were already 7 or 8 shadows of him imprinted on the wall behind him. Now I'm irritable, very irritable. Amidst the billowing dust, Yin Nuoxing pulled himself out of the wall once again. The violent and frenzied exchange of blows, the sudden energy impact, the sudden energy interference, and being slammed into the wall all of a sudden. This cycle had already repeated 7 or 8 times. He was getting a little impatient, and this was not a good time to drag on. He could not see what was going to happen next, and there was no need to talk about keeping his trump cards. The meaning of a trump card was the moment when the cards were flipped. With a whoosh, the chaos shadow's figure tore through the dust and charged towards him. A huge black claw of a tree viciously stabbed at him. Sinful whisper, soul-piercing. A red-black energy ring suddenly exploded from Yin Nuoxing's body and spread across the entire space without any delay. In an instant, all the energy in the space froze as if time and space were frozen in place. The shadow was also nailed in the air, unable to move. Its huge claw was only 2 inches away from touching Yin Nuoxing's forehead, but it was frozen in place. It could be seen that the shadow was trembling and struggling, wanting to move but completely unable to do so. Yin Nuoxing slowly stood up and slowly took the nether void sword from the side. He held it high in front of the shadow, gathering energy madly. Unfortunately, there were no details on the shadow's face. Apart from its nose, he could not see any other facial features. Otherwise, he might be able to see a faint expression of fear. Even if there was no fear, it would be nice to see the shadow's expression now. He wanted to see how the shadow's eyes would look like. Nether void firmament slash. A sword ray that contained order and chaos surged out of the nether void sword with a power that could split the primordial realm apart. As Yin Nuoxing's sword penetrated the shadow's body, A wave of mottled sword ray erupted from its back, tearing a crack in the wall that led to nothingness. The entire chaos domain shook and almost collapsed. *TU. Letting go of the nether void sword, Yin Nuoxing's arm, which was covered in hundreds of layers of formations, roared and punched out viciously, sending the shadow flying. As it flew backwards, the mottled energy ring exploded. The explosion of energy caused the shadow to fly backwards at a speed tens of thousands of times faster than the speed at which it had pasted Yin Nuoxing onto the wall. In a flash, it was embedded into the wall. He had purposely aimed and did not let the shadow fall into nothingness. This is your own power? Or is it their power? Amidst the billowing dust, the Chaos Fiend Shadow's figure appeared to be faintly illusory. Yin Nuoxing held the nether void sword and quickly walked up to it. Hearing its words, he couldn't help but sneer. Take a guess. Your evil expression is exactly the same as theirs. Yin Nuoxing was shocked when he heard that, but he was relieved after a moment. After all, the older the monsters in the void were, the more likely they were to be like the old urchin. He was an accident, an exception, and not a representative. Therefore, he was not surprised at all when he heard it say that the primordial god looked like this. He even wanted to see them show off. Crack! The sound of something shattering drew Yin Nuoxing's attention. He raised his head and looked in front of him. His left arm, which had been touched by his power of order, suddenly broke into pieces and fell to the ground. The cut marks left by the nether void sword that fell neatly from the middle released the power of order, which began to spread to the surroundings. The pieces fell off like a broken porcelain doll. Ha! You win this round, heir of the primordial god. It suddenly laughed in a low voice. It was just a shadow, and the main body was probably relying on this shadow to size him up. It's rare for you to be chosen by us, but you've personally given up this qualification. If something happens in this world that you can't change, I wonder if you'll feel despair. Despair? Yin Nuoxing raised his eyebrows slightly and replied with a strange expression. Can't you tell? What? It's nothing. Looks like you don't know. Then it's fine. Yin Nuoxing chuckled softly. He turned around and walked deeper into the chaos domain. Order and chaos. You said it yourself. To me, it's just a matter of standpoint. I'm still attached to the world of order, so I won't choose chaos. Give it up. There's nothing to say. However, from my personal standpoint, there's no difference whether I choose order or chaos. To me, whether it's them or you, all of you are evidence of the existence of absurdity itself. And I'm the biggest wrong joke in this world, in this void. There's nothing to say from the start. So let's not talk nonsense when we fight later. Watching him walk away step by step, the ethereal words echoed softly in its ears. Before it was completely shattered, it seemed to understand what he meant when he said, I don't know. So that's how it is. Interesting. You are indeed very interesting. Yin Nuoxing waved his hand without turning back as a response. He stood on the pillar that brought him to this height and lightly stomped his foot. Annihilation energy spread out, and the platform trembled as a response, bringing him slowly deeper into the chaos domain. Annihilation energy. Phew, if the true form of the specter was here, that's going to be difficult. After all, it only used pure non-order energy from start. Its level is similar to origin energy and annihilation energy, but it's still lacking something of a higher level. Without divinity, rules, and order, it is also lacking by a level. Only the level of the energy itself is comparable to that level of energy intensity. Yin Nuoxing let out a long sigh of relief. I didn't expect it to take so much effort. There's a gap between order and order. It can't be helped that it's suppressed. The little angel sighed softly. The energy was powerful enough, but the specter itself was still a little weak. Was it really going to fight against that kind of enemy in such a state? There'll be a way, probably. Yin Nuoxing laughed dryly and looked up at the blurry white light that was slowly rising and getting closer. He took a deep breath. Up ahead. I don't know what will be there. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.